attitude, well.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller's back in the studio today. We are broadcasting live, online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, the UAW is on strike at facilities at all of the big three automakers. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about it. We are also going to be talking about what workers in the South were up to. Almost 2,500 working folks in the southern United States and her colonies filed for a union election in the last 7 days, folks. Big news! And we're going to be taking a look at what the bosses were up to in the South. Spoiler alert, not good. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and I think the line is open. If it's not, we're going to get it open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you are a UAW member or retiree, then let us know in the YouTube chat. Let us know your area code so that we can pull you out of the queue. Because we definitely want to prioritize hearing from UAW members, I'm interested in what they have to say. So again, that phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail or send us a text message throughout the week. We might respond on the next episode. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. You're going to want to bookmark that page because that is where you find all of the newest stuff. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air, folks. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to be part of one of the folks that help us stay on the air, tvlr.fm/donate. You can make a one-time donation or become a recurring monthly donor. Any amount helps, from $1 to $50. We appreciate it all. You can also go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report or buy our merch on our store, tvlr.fm/store. That is also where you can buy tickets to our first live show tomorrow. That's right, folks. Our first live show is tomorrow in Huntsville off of Lehman Ferry Road at Shenanigans Comedy Theater. We are going to have an opening stand-up set by local working comedian Sci-Fi. We are going to be having union members talking about beating the boss. We are going to have games. We're going to have union-made booze. It's going to be a lot of fun. Shenanigans Comedy Theater. Off Lehman Ferry Road tomorrow, Sunday, September 17th at 6 p.m. If you have a VIP ticket, you get in 1 hour early. tvlr.fm/store to get tickets. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you're a member of a union, then definitely think about getting your local to sponsor the show. While the largest single source of funding comes from our listeners, the majority of our funding comes from our union sponsors, and we are proud of that. We do not hide it. We're proud of it. We very much appreciate our union sponsors.
Absolutely. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out. So thanks for spending some time with us this morning.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the YouTube chat. Chris from Local 652 GM, 1 day longer, solidarity forever. Indeed, Infinite Content says that the Teamsters have refused to move any Big Three cars that the Big Three automakers want to get transported to the struck plants, and that is true. And the Teamsters always do that. They have it in their contract with UPS that they cannot be forced to cross picket lines. Chase says Local 249. Justin says Windsor Assembly, CACA, our countdown ends Monday at midnight. Justin says full support. The Darwin Clause, Stand Up UAW, Local 602. Hoosier says Local 685. Folks, a lot of UAW members in the chat. If you want to call in, 844-899-TVLR is the number. 844-899-8857. We appreciate you tuning in. But since we don't have any callers in the queue right now, let's go ahead and talk about what happened last week in Southern labor. This is a segment that we do every week. We are a Southern Union radio program. We are on terrestrial radio stations across the South, and, working folks across the South are moving. We're doing stuff all the time, and not enough people know about it. So we like to take a little bit of time every Saturday morning to do a little bit of rapid fire recount. So here's what happened last week in new election filings. Like I said, it was a big week for election filings in the Southern United States and her colonies. 2,455 workers filed for a union election in just last week, the last 7 days, in just the Southern United States and her colonies. That is amazing. Here they are. 25 workers at Science News Media Group in Washington, D.C. filed for a union election with the Washington-Baltimore News Guild, Local 32035. 84 drivers and merchandisers at PepsiCo in Collierville, Tennessee filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 667. 9 workers at Lush Cosmetics in Friendswood, Texas filed for a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 455. 6 workers at Given Glass and Glazing in South Charleston, West Virginia filed for a union election with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT, District Council 53, Local Union 1195. 950 workers, from apprentice to journeyman, meter techs to heavy equipment operators, and more at Luma Energy Serve Company, which is the electricity provider in San Juan, Puerto Rico, filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 222. 17 workers at Starbucks in Farmers Branch, Texas, filed for a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 8 workers at Cisco in Louisville, Kentucky, filed for a union election with the General Drivers, Warehousemen, and Helpers Local Union 89, which is an affiliate of the Teamsters. 7 staff for the union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, in Washington, D.C., filed for a union election with the Washington-Baltimore News Guild Local Union 32035. 25 employees for the Allied Universal Security Services in Washington, D.C., filed for a union election with the Law Enforcement Officers Security Union. 31 service techs and advisors at Honda of Frontenac in St. Louis, Missouri, filed for a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. 12 workers at Marijuana Dispensary Home State in Kansas City, Missouri, filed for a union election with the Teamsters, Local 955. 6 workers at Panelmatic St. Louis in Earth City, Missouri, filed for a union election with IBEW Local 1. 780 workers, huge unit, at Pico Foods in West Point, Mississippi, filed for a union election with UFCW Local 1529. 215 workers at Phoenix Paper in Wickliffe, Kentucky filed for a union election with the United Steelworkers International Union. 200 workers at Grupo Antolin in Kansas City, Missouri filed for a union election with Teamsters Local 41. 50 workers at Morton Salt in Cape Canaveral, Florida filed for a union election with the USW. 30 workers at Battles Transportation in Washington, D.C. filed for a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 689, and one group of workers withdrew their petition for a union election last week. 300 at Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages in Fort Worth, Texas, withdrew their petition for a unionization with the Teamsters, Local 997. We didn't have too many election results last week, and they were decidedly not good, but we did save the best for last. Starting off, 4 workers at CTI Foundation Terminal, Incorporated, in Savannah, Georgia, tied 2-2 in their election on whether or not to unionize with the USW, meaning the election is a loss for the pro-unionization workers. 7 sprinkler fitters and apprentices at E-Fire Southern in Gulfport, Mississippi, voted against unionization with the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry, UA, Local 669. 13 workers at Papa John's in Houston, Texas, voted against unionization with the General Service Union, 0-2. Interesting. 10 security guards at Fideicomiso Olympico in Salinas, Puerto Rico, voted against unionization with the Union Bonafide de Celeste. The Bonafide Union of Security Officers is what it means in English. I looked it up. 2-6, they voted against unionization. 67 workers at Southwest Key Programs in El Paso, Texas, voted against unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 351, 20-42. Like I said, though, saved the best for last because 25 workers at GE Appliances in Orlando, Florida, voted in favor of unionization with the Industrial Division of the Communication Workers of America, IUE-CWA, 20-5.
Way to go. Shout out IUE.
Indeed. Strikes and bargaining updates. This has been a huge story, and we need to get somebody on to talk about this because this has just been crazy, and we haven't been able to talk about it because there's been so much going on. But despite pleas from students, faculty members, and academic organizations to change course, and despite protesters disrupting its Friday meeting, the West Virginia University Board of Governors voted yesterday to slash 143 faculty positions and 28 academic programs from its flagship Morgantown campus. Huge cuts to the university from the mismanagement of the university president. Absolutely despicable. Sanitation workers, members of the United Electrical Workers UE Local 150 for the city of Durham, North Carolina, returned to work last week after a 6-day strike, even though their demands had not yet been met. Their struggle for higher pay continues. They've been continuing to hold events after their return to work to apply pressure to the city, and this morning they announced that the city had agreed to a $3,000 bonus for every city employee, which is short of the $5,000 bonus that the union was demanding, but still better than a $0 bonus. The union is still going to continue fighting for higher wages and the rest of that bonus. Shangri-La dispensary workers with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 655 in Columbia, Missouri, are still on strike. They began in May. Three Brothers coffee workers with UFCW Local 1995 in Nashville, Tennessee, have been on strike since June. Memphis soy protein production workers with the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, BCTGM Local 390G, have also been on strike since June. The UAW went on a partial strike last week. All the big three UAW represented facilities in the South remain at work, but have been called on by the UAW International to maintain constant strike readiness. About 10% of the UAW's big three automaker membership is out on strike now. In policy, politics, and legislation, the Brookwood Baptist Health Center will close 2 labor and delivery units in the Birmingham area next month, making Shelby County the largest county in the state without a labor and delivery department at 230,000 people. 250,000 people in the United States in the year of our Lord 2023 without a labor and delivery unit. Insane. Help at Home, which is a home health provider, is completely pulling its services out of Alabama at the end of September and plans to lay off nearly 800 employees after blaming the state's inaction to expand Medicaid.
Wow. How many more jobs have to be lost? How many more lives have to be lost?
U.S. Senator from Alabama Katie Britt last week came out in favor of free breast cancer diagnosis tests for women, saying, quote, "No woman across America should be faced with the impossible choice between affording basic necessities such as food or being able to confirm whether she has a life-threatening illness." Now that's interesting because she has not come out in favor of free health care for women with a positive diagnosis, which presumably means that she is okay with women across America being faced with the impossible choice between affording basic necessities such as food and being able to treat a life-threatening illness. She just wants you to know that you're going to die. Better than nothing, I guess, but really kind of brings into question, when you start going down that road, it's like, what is the stopping point? And she does, very incoherent. The U.S. Department of Labor proposed a new rule that would strengthen protection for farm workers in the H-2A visa program and help prevent abuses that undermine wages and standards for all agricultural workers. The proposed rule would add new protections for worker self-advocacy, better protect workers against retaliation, make foreign labor recruitment more transparent, and enhance the department's enforcement. This proposal builds on a final rule the department published in October 2022 that modernized key aspects of the H-2A program. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, as part of its People, Prosperity, and the Planet program, announced a $100,000 research grant funding to the University of Alabama in Huntsville to develop a low-cost household water filter that removes PFAS. This project will help promote clean drinking water supplies, particularly in small, rural, tribal, and disadvantaged communities. So very cool. That wraps up our what happened last week in Southern Labor, and we captured all of it. Nothing else happened, if you didn't hear it there. Of course, I'm kidding. If we missed something, let us know, tvlr.fm/contact, and we would love to add it to the next installment of Last Week in Southern Labor. Really appreciate everybody's time this morning. Like I said, if you're a UAW member, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Let us know if you're a UAW member and you've called in the chat. Let us know what your area code is so we can pull it out of the queue. We're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to break down what's going on with the UAW. We got a lot of clips to play, so make sure you stay tuned. We'll be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law.
You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law.
And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case.
Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. We appreciate your time this morning, folks. We've got a lot of people hanging out with us in the chat. About 60 people watching us right now live on YouTube, but only 14 likes. Please do get those numbers up. It helps us in the algorithm, helps people find our content. We're a small union talk radio program here in Alabama. Could use all the help that we could get, spreading the gospel of solidarity and unionism. Appreciate y'all tuning in. That one in the chat says, regarding the people who voted against unionization in last week in Southern Labor, the only reason I can think of as to why people are opposed to forming a union is because of threats and potential loss of employment. And indeed, that is, that's
part of it.
That's a big part of it, and that is why. That's why it's so, the recent CMEX ruling at the NLRB is so important, because that ruling basically states that, look, if you have a majority of people in your bargaining unit file an authorization card saying that, yes, I would like a union to represent me, and then you have an election, and then your employer violates the law, commits unfair labor practices to try to dissuade you from voting for the union, boom. You're automatically a union. Recognized by the government, the employer has to bargain. Big change in the NLRB process. Right. But if you listen to some people on YouTube, it doesn't matter at all. Very strange. There was a Infinite Content says, in related news, the UAW workers at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan are also on strike. Indeed. That he has been, Brother Sean has been opening all of his live streams with a quick note about what's going on in Michigan at Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and somewhere else. Is it New York? I can't remember, but they've got WestRock workers on strike. Adam, I don't know if you've noticed that. But we reported, we're probably one of the only people reporting on the WestRock lockout in Alabama last year, about a year ago. They were first locked down in October of 2022. So this was about a year ago when United Steelworkers members at WestRock in Cottonton, Alabama were locked out. And so the UAW has WestRock workers on strike right now. I wish I had more time to dig into that. But alas. Pooties says Local 588 here in solidarity. Appreciate you tuning in. Chris says Fain means business, and I like it. Already the best contract I've seen in 16 years of concessionary no strike clause negotiations. Long overdue, indeed. Tim says Mopar, Local 375 watching. Appreciate it. Chewy says solidarity. Andrew says LAP 862 ready to stand up. Stay strong, brothers and sisters. Darnell says, Local 900, my Ford plant is currently on strike. Darnell, solidarity, best of luck, keep up the fight. All the respect in the world to you, as you are the first group of folks in the UAW on strike. If you want to call in, we would welcome it. 844-899-8857. Christopher, Local 249, is ready to stand up with our brothers and sisters. Hold the line. It's time for the proletariat to take what is owed to us. Call Me Jay says the government steps in and makes some type of funding deal with these companies that would allow the demands of the UAW to be met. I mean, I would not be opposed to that. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into. We're going to go ahead and start breaking down what's been going on, because a lot has been happening with this UAW stuff on strike. And I just want to start this off by reminding people that the corporate media they're gonna pull what the compensation is for the top progression of the top tier of workers at the big three automakers. And then they're going to say, look at these people, they've got it better than you, and they're going on strike. They're greedy. They're shutting down the economy because they're greedy, while not talking about how the CEOs at all of these big three companies make 300 times more than that person, right? It's insane. And so they're going to take the top tier, the top progression of the top tier, despite the fact that the majority of UAW members at the big three automakers today are not in the first tier. They're in the second tier. They are either temporary employees or they are second tier permanent employees, meaning if they're temporary employees, they don't even have health care, they don't have a pension, they don't have a 401k, they don't have time off, nothing. It's just straight pay. And that straight pay starts at $15 an hour at some of these plants, and caps, and for temporary employees, caps after 6 years at $19.82 at a Jeep plant. After 6 years. And then if you want to go into the second tier of permanent employee, you got to take a pay cut to go to $17 an hour to top out at $32 an hour after like 8 years. It's insane what UAW members at the big three automakers have had to put up with. Okay, so the majority of people are either in the second tier of permanent employees, which means that they may get a similar rate of pay, but they don't have a pension, their health care is not as good, et cetera, or they're temporary employees who have even less than that doing the same job. Okay, so it's important to remember that, because a big part of this strike is the elimination of tiers, the ending of abuse of temporary workers, and bringing everyone tier one is one of the chants at these rallies and on the picket lines. And that's important to understand, and you're not going to hear that, unfortunately, on a lot of corporate media. And it's a shame, because, the media is supposed to inform people, and instead they're misinforming and misleading people. And over the last 4 years, Sean Fain on Wednesday night he's been doing weekly live streams, and he had a longer one last week on Wednesday night. It was about an hour long. I would recommend people go and watch it. It's very good. And he started off by showing some numbers over the last 4 years. And I didn't pull the graphic to show you on the screen, but I'm going to read this to you. Over the last 4 years, profits at the big three automakers have gone up by 65%. Pay for the CEOs at the big three automakers has gone up by 40%. Stock buybacks has gone up by 1,500%. I didn't read that wrong. I didn't add an extra zero. Stock buybacks are up by 1,500%. The average price of a car over the last 4 years has increased by 34%. Inflation over the last 4 years has increased by 20%. The top wage rate of the top tier of a UAW member, all of these numbers, remember, 65%, 40%, 1,500%, 34%, 20%. All of those numbers are what you need to have in mind, because the UAW top wage rate has only increased by 6%. Single digit in 4 years, 20% inflation. Golden era for these companies, according to the Ford CEO. 6% raise over 4 years. Insulting. And the labor cost per vehicle is 4 to 5%. 1/20th of the cost of a vehicle goes to paying the people who actually do the work. So let's listen to Shawn Fain talk about this moment. Here, let's play this clip about him, where he's really kind of, laying the truth out for people.
So think about that. They could double our wages and not raise car prices and still make billions of dollars in profit. They spent more money enriching shareholders in a year than they spent on us in the entirety of the last contract cycle. They want to scare the American people into thinking that auto workers are the problem. We're not the problem. That chart is the problem. Corporate greed is the problem. And come tomorrow night, if they force us, we're about to make it the big three's problem.
There you go. They could double what they pay these people and still make billions of dollars. Okay? It's important. One criticism that the UAW is demanding too much from the big three. That's one criticism. And here is, this is a quote from Shawn Fain, right?
Right.
He says, quote, "I know that our demands are ambitious, but I've told the companies repeatedly, I'm not the reason that the members' expectations are so high. What's driving members' expectations are the big three's profits. You cannot make $21 billion in profits in half a year, in 6 months, and expect members to take a mediocre contract. You cannot make $250 billion in North American profits over the last decade and expect us to keep aiming low and settling lower. Our campaign slogan is simple: record profits mean record contracts." So that's what they're, so that's where things stand as far as, what the media is trying to tell you. Just don't, and most people, and I'm kind of speaking to the choir for the most part, even beyond the normal audience that's going to find this stuff, because 75% of the American people support the auto workers.
That's right.
So it's a pretty common sense kind of thing. But so on each of these demands that they've got, and we're going to go through them one by one on tiers, wages, COLA, blah, blah, blah. The big three are not where they need to be. Just simply not. And so he went through these. He went through those in his live stream, and I'm just going to go through them quickly, and then we've got a couple more clips from that live stream. So on tiers, the UAW demands is to end tiers and have a 90-day progression to the top rate, and restore benefits, retiree health care, and pensions. Ford all of them want to keep tiers. Every single one. Ford, GM, and Stellantis. Ford wants a 4-year progression, and they rejected all pension and healthcare and retiree healthcare proposals. GM, they also want to keep a 4-year progression. They've rejected all pension and retiree healthcare proposals, and they want to continue substandard pay for CCA and GMCH. We had a brother from CCA call in and talk about how they're basically a separate second tier in GM. Unacceptable. Stellantis wants to keep 4-year progression, rejected all pension and retiree healthcare proposals, and they want to continue substandard pay at Mopar. On wages, UAW is demanding significant double-digit pay raises to match the salary increases of the big three CEOs, catch up with inflation, and make up for decades of falling wages. Ford, all of them have inadequate pay offers. Ford says 20% over 4 years. GM, 18% over 4 years. Stellantis, 17.5% over 4 years. Those don't even make up for the inflation of the last 4 years, right? So even with the most generous offer on the table right now, Ford, at the end of this 4-year contract, a Ford UAW member would be making less than they did in 2019. 4 years from now, 2027. Not acceptable. On COLA, cost of living adjustments, UAW wants a return to COLA. They say, like, look, if inflation rises, you got to meet that with your pay, because we can't be the only people that are at risk for inflation. You cannot offload all of the risk of inflation onto your employees, and that is a reasonable position. Ford is offering a deficient COLA that would only have provided an estimated wage protection of less than $1 over the next 4.5 years. GM has a deficient COLA that would provide an estimated 0% wage protection over the next 4.5 years. Stellantis has a deficient COLA that would provide an estimated 0% wage protection over the next 4.5 years, or lump sums that many employees won't receive. Now, look, these are all deficient. These are all not acceptable. But remember, and Sean Fain has pointed this out, at the beginning of this thing, everybody said there's no way you can get COLA back at all. COLA is off the table forever. We gave it up years ago. It's never coming back. It's back on the table. It's deficient, but it's back on the table. That's what happens when you aim high. That's what happens when you raise expectations and when you have a credible strike threat, when you are willing to leverage the power that you have. You get stuff back on the table. On profit sharing, the UAW wants to enhance profit sharing. And they say, look, if you're going to spend money on stock buybacks, they're not even saying you can't spend money on stock buybacks, which I think would be reasonable because, as somebody pointed out in the chat, they used to be illegal until Reagan came along. Ruined everything in this country. UAW says they want enhanced profit sharing, and they say, look, if you're going to spend money on stock buybacks, for every $1 million that you spend on stock buybacks, our members need $2. And that's still not even, you're only spending at that profit sharing formula, you're spending only like a third as much on workers as you are on shareholders, because they got about 140,000 members. So if you do $1 million in stock buybacks, what you're doing is like 700,000 or 600,000, or no, 140 members. That's only 300,000. $300,000 for every 1 million on stock buybacks. Okay, that is, again, eminently reasonable. In fact, I think the argument could be easily made that you ought to double the amount of stock buybacks on employees. For every $1 that you spend on stock buybacks, $2 ought to go to employees. But look, the UAW is being reasonable. Ford, all of them actually want concessions on profit sharing. Every single one. Ford would have resulted in a 21% smaller profit sharing check over the last 2 years. GM would have resulted in a 29% smaller profit sharing check last week. Stellantis calls for significant reductions of profit sharing checks based on an unknown internal company attendance calculation. On temporary employees, the UAW wants to end the abuse of temporary workers by converting to full-time after 90 days, providing full benefits and profit sharing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. shouldn't have a second tier of employees, shouldn't abuse temporary employees. Temporary employees are supposed to be temporary, right?
Right.
Ford says they'd be willing to do a conversion of all current temporary employees with 90 days continuous service to full-time in progression. So here we go. We're starting to get some movement from Ford on that. But from GM and Stellantis, they're both not adequate. GM says inadequate benefits, no profit sharing, meager wage increases to only $20 an hour for temporary employees. Not acceptable. Stellantis, no path to full-time. Inadequate benefits, no profit sharing, meager wage increases to $20 an hour. Not cutting it. On job security, the UAW wants the Working Family Protection Program, which we have been very hyped about. It's very cool. Basically says, look, if you take a plant away from our community, you've got to keep paying us to build our community. You can't leave us in the lurch. We're spending every day hundreds of years of our community's life for you. You can't just leave us in the lurch. You got to be in it with us. They also want the right to strike over plant closures. Ford rejected all job security proposals. GM rejected all job security proposals. Stellantis rejected all job security proposals and proposed the unilateral right to close and sell 18 facilities, including various assembly and powertrain plants and part depots. Not acceptable. Work-life balance. UAW wants an increased work-life and family balance with more paid time off and holidays. Ford rejected all quality of life proposals except for Juneteenth and 2 weeks of paid parental leave. GM rejected all quality of life proposals except Juneteenth. Stellantis rejected all quality of life proposals except Juneteenth. And this is another something that the corporate media is really hitting on. We're going to play a clip in overtime of Tim Scott saying how the 4-day work week is just insane. And these people would be saying the exact same thing in the in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when people were fighting for the 40-hour work week. They would say, "Oh, what you want to make more money and you want to work less? You're lazy. You're greedy." And that's absolutely not the case. American workers are more productive today than ever, and yet we are working more than in the past, and much more than people in other countries. Sean Fain has pointed this out multiple times in his live stream. Workers in Germany work 3 months less a year than American workers. 3 months less. You sacrifice 3 months, 30% more of your life to making some ghoul at the top of a corporation profits than workers in Germany. And yet somehow every single company in Germany has not moved and outsourced. Somehow Volkswagen still makes cars in Germany. Right? Not impossible. On retirees, UAW wants a significant increase to retiree pay. All of them have rejected increases to retiree pay. And so,
correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, I believe retirees haven't received a pay increase since 2003.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep, that's my understanding.
Last I checked, cost of living, it's gone up since 2003.
Yeah, indeed. So, and retirees, like Sean Fain has pointed out, retirees built these companies. Retirees built the UAW. Retirees built the middle class. And for the big three to disrespect them like that is just really, really, really gross. And so that's where they are, and that is why the UAW went on strike on Thursday night at midnight at facilities that all of the big three auto companies, for the first time in history, UAW's never done that. They've always picked a target to strike and tried to pattern agreements out, based on that. But this time they're targeting all of the companies. They're negotiating all the companies at the same time. And so that's the way that they're doing it. And specifically, what they're calling the stand-up strike is they are starting at multiple facilities or at one facility at each of the big three automakers and having them strike at first. So, and what that does is it gives them room to escalate. They don't put everything on the table at once. It gives them room to escalate at the bargaining table. It also saves their strike fund some money, because even though the UAW has the biggest strike fund of any union in the country, if you start doing math, as you should do if you're thinking about these things, if you start dividing any number by 140,000 employees, it gets small fast. It gets small fast. And so you don't want to ask people to go on strike if they don't have to. And you don't want to spend money that you don't have to. And so what they're trying to do is trying to maximize pain on the big three automakers with minimal pain for the UAW members. Also, what we've been seeing over the last couple of days since the strike began is Ford, and I think now another company came out this morning and saying that they are idling a couple of plants as a result of the strike at these final assembly plants. Some people are trying to say that striking final assembly plants is not strategic, which does not make sense to me, because for products to actually go to market, what has to happen? It has to be assembled, right, at the final assembly plant. Doesn't get sold if it's not assembled at the final assembly plant. Very strategic in my view. And so some of the companies are idling some of these other facilities that the UAW has not struck. And what does that mean? That means they are being locked out. That means they are not striking. That means they're eligible for unemployment. So that is that much less money that has to come out of the strike fund to support these workers because they're able to get unemployment. It's very strategic. Very, very strategic. And this also, like friend of the show, brother from Pennsylvania, Connor Lewis, president of Labor Council up there, he said that this gives them the ability in bargaining. If the big three automakers slide a proposal across the table and say, here's our offer, the UAW can just walk out of the room, make a call, come back to the table, and say, another plant just went on strike. That doesn't cut it.
Right.
Give us something else. And they're not going to know which plants are going to go on strike. Somebody else mentioned this in the chat. There are a lot of rumors, and it's not totally substantiated, but there's been a lot of UAW members saying this. So I think it's probably reasonable. And in these times did report that that the big three automakers were caught off guard. But what I'm talking about is that there was a leak that came out, ostensibly leaking the UAW strike targets. And so because of that, the big three tried to move products in anticipation of these facilities being struck. And the leak was of the wrong plants. It was not the plants that ultimately went on strike. And so there was very costly movement that was for naught because it wasn't those facilities. And then the facilities that did go on strike were not prepared to go on strike. The management wasn't, right? So causing a lot of confusion, causing millions of dollars in damages outside of just what you would get from the loss of production. So it's great. And, another thing, people are saying, like, why don't you just all go out at once, right? Why don't you all go out at once? And I do not understand how people do not see the logic of starting small and escalating, because they couldn't strike before this because of the contract. Before the contract expires, you can't strike unless you're willing to basically bankrupt your union. And, maybe there are times and places where you've got to take a stand basically on principle. But again, no reason to bankrupt your union if you don't have to, right? And so there we go. That's what they're doing. And it makes a lot of sense to me. The members seem like they're behind it by and large. The members on the picket line seem like they're having a good time. They're in high spirits. There was some video circulating of somebody burning something in a burn barrel, and so the reporter asked him, what is that in the burn barrel? He's like, it's our old contract, copies of our old contract. So good times being had, and things are getting serious. So that's basically what is happening right now. And I wanted to play this next clip from Shawn Fain before as he was gearing up to announce what exactly the strike plans were going to be. And it's a long clip. It's about 5 minutes long, but it was so powerful in my view that I really, really wanted to share it with y'all. And like I said, the stream was like an hour long on Wednesday night, so I would recommend going back and checking it out. But listen to how he talks about his run for the presidency in the UAW, the moment that we're in, and some of the thoughts that's going through his mind as all of this is happening. Let's play this clip.
Those of you that don't know me, one of the first things I do every day when I get up as I crack open my devotional for a daily reading and I pray. Earlier this week on Saturday, I was struck with my daily reading, which seemed to speak directly to the moment we find ourselves in. And it was called Fear and Faith. And I found it interesting that morning I was getting ready to head to Solidarity House to meet with the negotiating committees and review this plan with them. And under that Fear and Faith daily reading, the commentary I read talked about great acts of faith are seldom born out of calm calculation. It wasn't logic that caused Moses to raise his staff on the bank of the Red Sea. It wasn't a confident committee that prayed in a small room in Jerusalem for Peter's release from prison. It was a fearful, desperate band of believers that were backed into a corner. It was a church with no options, a congregation of the have-nots pleading for help. And never in those moments were they stronger. At the beginning of every act of faith, there's often a seed of fear. And I got to tell you this, when I made the decision to run for president of our union, it became a real test of my faith, because I can tell you I sure as hell had doubts. Because I knew what I was taking on. And I knew what I was up against. So I had to look myself in the mirror and I had to tell myself, either you believe it's possible to stand up and make a difference, or you don't. And if you don't believe it, then shut up and stay on the sideline. I knew in my heart that the membership felt exactly like I did, that my union family was fed up with all the corrupt stuff that had went on in the past, and they were fed up with the company union philosophy. I chose to have faith in our members, and that's why I'm standing here today with all of you. I chose to be sworn in when I became president on my grandmother's Bible, which I have here with me. I take this with me a lot of places. In 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, my grandmother's parents couldn't provide for their children any longer. So they dropped her and her brothers and sisters off at an orphanage. That orphanage gave her this Bible. And in the front of this Bible, there's an inscription that has my grandmother's name and says Christmas 1933, Halston Orphanage. Years later, my grandparents were part of the millions of families who moved to the Midwest to work for auto companies and seek out a better life. Like my grandfather's pay stub that I carry with me every day, I'm proud to have inherited my grandma's Bible and her faith. And I want to share with you another powerful verse from Scripture that really speaks to me in this moment. It's Matthew 17:20 and 21, where it says, "For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." For years, as a member of the UAW, and even during this current round of bargaining, I found it heartbreaking to read comments from members and retirees that have such low expectations. How many times have we been told we'll live to fight another day? I've read comments such as, "You can't get cost of living back, it's gone forever." I've heard comments about, "You can't bargain for retirees." I've read comments about how you're asking for too much. That's company talk. And it comes from a mindset that's a direct result of company unionism. It comes from the worst of our union's history, of setting expectations low and settling even lower. And for many of us who have yet to see our union fight hard and win big, it's hard to imagine what that would look like. Making bold demands and organizing to fight for them is an act of faith. It's an act of faith in each other. And yes, these corporations are mountains, but together we can make these mountains move.
The first time that I listened to that, like, I'm not a religious person, but I started tearing up. I thought it was very inspiring. Later, like I said, continue to recommend reading that. Lenny Powers in the comments says, a camel has more of a chance to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man has to pass through the gates of heaven. He also read that verse in the live stream. And so basically telling the big three CEOs that they're going to go to hell, which, if you read the Bible, then that's probably, if you read it literally, if you're one of those, then, that's kind of what you're stuck with. And so I really appreciated that. Like I said, not a religious person, but I grew up very religious. That's the kind of language that I have grown up around. That's the kind of speech that I've grown up around, and it makes me feel at home. And for other people that are not religious, you can't. That's just, I've seen some silly stuff about Christian nationalism in the UAW. Come on, that's ridiculous.
Right. I don't think references to Scripture are equivalent to Christian nationalism.
He's not saying that you got to be a Christian. He's saying this is part of what's motivating him, his faith in a higher power, and his faith in his fellow human beings. And if you're not willing to hear what people believe, just hear it. You're not going to be very good in the movement. So I really appreciated that. I thought it was very good. And so there we go. They're on strike. Yesterday, he had a rally with Bernie Sanders, and Bernie's always good at these kind of things. And so I have a clip from his speech last night. So here's Bernie Sanders.
And let me tell you, and Sean has made this point over and over again, in the last 50 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth. Problem is, it's gone in the wrong direction. Instead of going from the top down to the bottom, it's gone from the bottom up to the top. And what this strike is about, and what workers are standing up all over this country for, is we're going to reverse that trend. If the ruling class of this country wants a redistribution of wealth, we're going to give it to them.
There we go. Speaking of Wall Street and a redistribution of wealth, the CEOs have been reacting to this stuff and talking about how good they think that their contract offer is. And just remember, I went through everything with you. It's not great. They're not meeting the demands. Here's what Jim Farley, who is also, by the way, some other Farleys related to him. The Chris Farley. He's related to Chris Farley from SNL fame, which is unfortunate because Chris is cool. But this Farley is not good. Here's what Jim Farley had to say about the contract.
Quickly put in some perspective, the offer that they have, what they're demanding relative to where you are right now, how much damage would that do to the bottom line if you were to say, sure, we'll give you 40%?
If we signed up for the UAW's request, instead of making money and distributing $75,000 in profit sharing in the last 10 years, we would have lost $15 billion and gone bankrupt by now. The average pay would be nearly $300,000 fully fringed for a 4-day work week. There is no way.
Per employee, per UAW employee.
Yeah, this is our fully tenured school teacher in the U.S. makes $66,000. Someone from the military or fireman makes mid-50,000.
Okay, pause
this
it
is
there.
4 or 5 times, 6 times what they make. There's no way we can be sustainable as a company.
He is saying, and now that $300,000 fully fringed, I doubt it. He's been lying, and we're going to show you another part of how he lied. But talking about fully fringed $300,000 compared to straight salary for teachers, not fully fringed, at $60,000. I mean, he knows this is like his world, talking about salaries and compensation and all of this kind of stuff. He knows he's being a slimy operative in that clip, comparing fully fringed to salary, to straight salary. Just really, really, I mean, disgusting stuff. But this is the kind of this is the people that Wall Street is sending. Okay, let's continue.
That's why we put our proposal in 2 weeks ago to say, look, you want us to choose bankruptcy over supporting our workers? Here's our proposal. Let's work through this. We've heard nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. The UAW is not asking Ford to go bankrupt. And here is Shawn Fain's response to Ford's allegations.
I heard the CEO of Ford say that it would bankrupt them if they met your demands. What do you think of that?
I think it's a joke. You know what? They could double our pay right now. Labor, the cost of labor that goes into a vehicle is 5% of the vehicle. They could double our wages, and they could not raise the price of vehicles, and they would still make billions of dollars. It's a lie like everything else that comes out of their mouth.
That's exactly right. And look, even if let's say that you're predisposed to believe for some reason that the CEO of the Ford Motor Company is acting in good faith, that he actually is worried about bankruptcy for the company, instead of offering concessionary profit-sharing formulas, instead of not moving on temporary employees or pensions or anything like this, he could come closer to meeting the UAW on all of these other things. And then he could also come and say, look, to show you that we're serious about this, we want to be partners in this, we want to be a team, we're a family, remember? We're going to take a haircut. The shareholders and executives and CEOs and the people who don't work but who make money because they have money, we're going to take a haircut like all of you did in 2008. So in exchange for not giving you every single thing you want, I'm going to cut my salary by half and only make $15 million a year. I'm going to cut my salary by half and go from $30 million to $15 million a year. I'm going to put a cap on stock buybacks. I'm going to put a cap on dividends. Shareholders got more in the last year than UAW members over the last 4 years. That's never going to be the case going forward. It's never going to be more than 1-to-1. If a shareholder gets $1, a UAW member gets $1. That's what we're doing moving forward because we're a team, we're a family, remember? But that's never on offer. That's never on offer. These people always want the unilateral ability to increase their compensation to ungodly levels without the input of their employees while crying poor when the workers demand their fair share. So don't buy a lick of it until and unless they start doing some of that, which they have shown no compunction to do. Let's take a look at Mary Barra from GM, what she's saying about the contract.
One of your competitors said the deal that the UAW wants would push them into bankruptcy. Can GM be successful if you met all their demands?
Actually, no. The demands, which has been said, and we said, for the life of the contract, the initial demands were over $100 billion. We still have a ways to go with the offer they put on the table last night.
Yeah. Same thing that Jim Farley's saying, and exact same response from Shawn Fain, basically. That they're lying.
According to SEC filings, you received nearly $21 million in total compensation in 2022. In comparison, the median total compensation for Ford employees was about
Yeah, but this is a really funny clip, and we're gonna. So anyway, like I said, they're not offering to take a haircut, and they've been actually explicitly asked about this because this has been a big part of the messaging from the UAW. Look at how much these bigwigs are making compared to us. And so if you are a thinking person, this would be one of the first things that you start to go to. Look, maybe I can take a haircut and only make $15 million, $10 million a year instead of $20 or $30 million. And so they have both been asked, Jim Farley and Mary Barra, to justify their pay. Here's what Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, what he had to say when he was asked about it.
According to SEC filings, you received nearly $21 million in total compensation in 2022. In comparison, the median total compensation for Ford employees was about $75,000. That's a 281-to-1 ratio. Do you think that gap should change?
Pause it here. Look at this freak's eyes. Can you see? If you're listening on the radio, find us on YouTube. And look at this guy's eyes. I mean, this is a guy, I don't know how he couldn't have been expecting this question, but this is someone who is freaked out, who has no idea what to say. I mean, just, it's an amazing face. What a ghoul. Let's continue.
Well, I think, first of all, my job is to add value to the company and to make sure all of our workforce is handsomely rewarded, that we all benefit in growth. And yes, that's, at all levels of the company, we have to be competitive. But my goal is just totally focused on making sure we have a vibrant future for everyone, especially our factory workers. My grandfather was an hourly worker for Ford, and we want to make sure everyone has a future, but we have to be competitive.
Talk about the potential costs to your company and to the American consumers.
There you go. No follow-up on that question. How do you justify that salary? Do you think that pay gap should be lowered? No follow-up from the corporate media. How is this going to affect consumers? How's it going to affect consumers? Kudos to her, I guess, for asking the question, but I do not know how you don't follow up when they so brazenly don't answer you. That's wild. Absolutely wild. Here's what Mary Barra had to say when she was asked a similar question.
I think the problem that we...
wrong one. Let's see.
I think...
Sorry, we don't have Mary Barra's.
No. Well, that's fine, because she basically did the same thing, didn't answer it, but she said something. One thing that I wanted to pull out from hers is that she said, my compensation is 92% based on the performance of the company. Now, what does that mean? I have to translate Wall Street speak for you, because that's just a bunch of rubbish. When she says the performance of the company, she means stock price. She doesn't actually mean how good are the vehicles, how well are the employees taken care of, how satisfied are the customers. Stock price is what she means by that. And stock price can be manipulated by things like stock buybacks, like we talked about. That used to be illegal, but now they are legal. And what happens when you buy a stock back is you decrease the supply. And so, the supply and demand 101, Econ 101, right? That teaches you if the supply of the stocks is lower, the cost is going to be higher artificially, right? And when the stock price goes higher, that means her pay increases. This came about because of, again, Reagan cutting the capital gains tax to where when you make money, because you have money, because you own stocks in a company, and then you realize those gains, that is taxed at like half of what wages is taxed at. And so that is why CEOs and other executives are now paid largely in stocks instead of wages, because they're taxed less than us for it. It's not based on performance. It's because you get a tax cheat on it. That's why. And Ben Shapiro, he tried to help, but he was not helpful at all. He was replying to this notion about how stock buybacks are bad. And he said on Twitter, quote, "Stock buybacks are generally undertaken by companies to prevent stock prices from remaining artificially low, thus undermining the ability of companies to issue new stock and generate liquidity to pay for, say, expensive union contracts." And now this is strange for me to read, because Ben Shapiro is ostensibly a supporter of the market. And so it's amazing to me that he thinks that the CEO and the executives and the shareholders of these big three automakers can know better what the price of the stock should be than the market. That's just super strange. Super strange that somebody who is a free market ideologue rather than a partisan for the ruling class. He would say that he's not a partisan for the ruling class. He just thinks that the free market just is better for everybody. But here he thinks that the ruling class knows better than the market. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre defense. He was of no help to the automakers. So there we go. UAW's on strike, 3 facilities. They're going to ramp it up as the big 3 automakers refuse to meet their demands. And we are absolutely supportive of them. As soon as there's a picket line that comes up near us, we're going to be going to it and hope to see a bunch of y'all out there. And we're going to be heading into overtime here in a few minutes. So if you're a UAW member, get ready to call in 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. And with that, we're going to go ahead and head to a break. We've got one or two more segments that we want to get to before we go into overtime. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law.
You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law.
And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case.
Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come
Radio Show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you listening. If you want to support the show, tvlr.fm/donate for a one-time donation or a recurring monthly contribution. The largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so we really appreciate all the support. If you are in the area and you want to come to our live show, our first ever live show is going to be tomorrow at Shenanigans Comedy Theater off Lehman Ferry Road in Huntsville, Alabama. Going to have union members, local working comedians, union-made beer. Going to be a good time. 6 p.m., Shenanigans Comedy Theater. tvlr.fm/store to get your tickets. We appreciate everybody tuning in. 133 people watching us on YouTube, 64 likes. If you haven't liked the stream yet, then please do. Also, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future episodes. We clip the show throughout the week. We're live every Saturday morning, every Thursday morning. So, yeah, keep on coming around. Really quickly before we get to Boss Watch, it's going to be a shorter Boss Watch, so I think we've got time for this, Adam. It's the 5-year anniversary of something. Or the 1 year or 3. It's an anniversary. Talk to us about it. What's going on?
Oh, okay. All right, I see what you're doing here. All right, so let's see. This week was the 7-year anniversary of Casey Wardynski resigning from Huntsville City Schools as the superintendent. You get those Facebook memories that pop up, and happened to see that, and shared it with Jacob. He wanted me to speak to it on the show today because Casey Wardynski was superintendent of Huntsville City Schools for over 5 years, and made quite the impact. He ran for Congress shortly after. That was last year, 2022. He ran for 5th Congressional District. He was working in the Trump administration at one point. So what do you want to know about his resignation?
Yeah, well, basically, what was it that he was pushed out for? What was that about?
Sure. So he announced this hastily called press conference, and I booked it down there, as did a lot of reporters and anybody who could, to the school board, where he had this press conference and he dropped a couple bombshells, and one of which was that he was resigning and he was going to give less than 48 hours notice, which, by the way, is not allowed for teachers. Your certificate will be flagged if you do that as a teacher, but regardless, he was resigning with less than 48 hours notice. And he also announced that he was in a relationship with a lady named Karen Lee. And Karen Lee was the CEO of a contractor that just so happened to have had millions of dollars of business with Huntsville City Schools. And so there was an obvious question about conflict of interest there. And he said that he was trying to be on the up and up, and wanted to just go ahead and resign lest it become a problem. And of course, it was increasingly a problem because just a couple weeks beforehand, his allies had lost the school board election. And so for the very first time, he was actually going to face opposition at the school board. He had had a 5-0 majority his whole time. And there were 2 seats that were open that August 23rd or so. And he resigned, a few weeks later. He knew he was going to be facing a lot of extra scrutiny. And having a relationship with a contractor is typically frowned upon. So he did resign, and it just so happens there was a big invoice for that contractor that was slated to be on the school board agenda that week. They ended up having to go to court, the school system and the contractor, Pinnacle Schools. What it was is that the school system had outsourced the alternative school program. So if you remember when you were in school, there were those kids who got in a lot of trouble, so much trouble that they weren't allowed back at the normal school, alternative school. Huntsville City Schools privatized that, and Pinnacle was the provider of those services. That was the official reason why he resigned so quickly and got the heck out of Dodge.
And now you are, new listeners to the show may not know, but you formerly worked for the teachers union here in Huntsville, and so with him as a superintendent, he was like a really big fan of yours, right?
Oh yeah. We had quite the battles over the year, or it was about a year and a half, I guess, when I was in the AEA position in Huntsville while he was superintendent, and it got really ugly pretty quick. I called him out in the Huntsville Times like my second week on the job, I think, and so it was kind of on from there. And he resented the public, he resented teachers, he resented employees, and so for anyone to ask questions of him, particularly in public, like at a school board meeting, it was it was something he took in a very adversarial way, and so he would act like a jerk, if you asked a question, if you just wanted to clarify something, if something didn't make sense, because, that's the sort of attitude so many folks have when they make it to these positions, where they're not really public service minded. The man never met a public tax dollar that he didn't want to put into a private pocket. So, that was sort of his MO.
And so basically you won.
I think the people won.
There you go.
I think, the interesting thing is that for the last year or so of his administration, people across the city of Huntsville organized across party lines, across neighborhood lines, across racial lines. There was a really broad coalition of people who were, attending school board meetings and attending and organizing community meetings all over town. And, I led an effort with the Huntsville Education Association to sue Casey Rudinsky, and we were pretty successful with that. Unfortunately, I faced a lot of internal opposition from the association, both at the local and the state level, which really hampered a lot of our opposition efforts. But, that's a story for me to share at tomorrow night's live show.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and take a look at what bosses were doing last week in the South. Every week, every day on the local news, you're going to see a mugshot of somebody that, stole something from a grocery store, whatever. But you never see all the laws that the bosses are breaking. So we try to provide a balance. And so let's start off in West Virginia, where coal cretins are crying poor. Coal industry bosses owe more than $16 million in unpaid federal mine safety fines as of the end of July 2023. Unpaid mine safety fines are the equivalent of a rude gesture from mine operators to Congress and the Mine Safety and Health Administration, said the United Mine Workers spokesman Aaron Bates in an email. She continued, it leads to a lack of accountability and compromises the safety of miners. In particular, mines controlled by West Virginia Governor Jim Justice and his 2 adult children owed $3.09 million in delinquent federal mine safety fines as of July, according to data uncovered by a Gazette Mail Freedom of Information request. The Justice's mine safety debt comprised nearly a fifth of the debt nationwide, according to the Mine Safety and Health Administration. Just wild stuff that these people can get away with. In Hawaii, a Georgia-based prime contractor schemed to deny payment of overtime wages to 110 construction workers from 12 states employed on several hotel renovation projects in Honolulu between 2019 and 2022. The U.S. Department of Labor has recovered $700,000 in back wages and damages for these 110 workers. Investigators with the department's wage and hour divisions found that SNA Industries of Sewanee, Georgia, paid the affected workers straight time rates for all hours worked and used a series of illegal payment arrangements to avoid paying overtime wages for hours over 40 in a work week. The workers were employed by 7 subcontractors to complete various renovation projects at Hilton and Marriott resorts. In addition to the back wages and an equal amount in liquidated damages, the department assessed SNA Industries with $40,000 in civil money penalties for its repeated and willful FLSA violations. Wages and damages recovered ranged from $1,000 to $28,000 per worker.
In Missouri, on March 27th of 2023, an 18-year-old employee of a Missouri contractor was applying sealant to a commercial building's roof when he fell more than 22 feet and suffered serious injuries that left him in a coma for 5 days before he died. After the tragic fall, the employer, Troyer Constructors LLP, offered a foreman and allowed a foreman and another worker to continue working without fall protection until they finished their shift. The same day. So this guy falls eventually to his death, and the employer's like, no, keep working, and no fall protection. Insane. In addition, inspectors with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned that the Jamesport employer in Missouri had fall protection available but allowed employees to decide if they wanted to use it. OSHA investigators determined that, in addition to not ensuring employees used fall protection, the contractor failed to train them on how to use it. Investigators also found that Troyer Roofing did not train employees on proper forklift operations, failed to provide workers with face and eye protection, and did not have a written hazard communication program for sealants and other chemicals that the employer used. Penalties proposed are $205,000. The company has 15 business days from receipt of the citations to comply, request an informal conference, or contest the findings. We had several dishonorable mentions, including 2 from Alabama, where Security Engineers Incorporated, a Birmingham, Alabama-based company specializing in contract security services, which operates in at least 14 states, violated federal labor law when it denied female applicants employment and job assignments because of their sex, the EEOC charged in a lawsuit. Delaware-based TCI of Alabama, LLC, which is a recycler of large items such as transformers, violated federal law by firing an employee for participating in an internal investigation of alleged sex discrimination, the U.S. Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit. 2 weeks after federal workplace safety investigators warned the operator of a Tamuning construction company of hazard conditions facing employees working in an excavation, they returned to find the company again exposing workers to potentially deadly trench hazards as they installed a sewer line at the Paradise Court subdivision in Mangalau. The DOL proposes $73,000 in penalties. There's a couple others, but you're going to have to go to tvlr.fm/contact and sign up for our newsletter to find those. One more announcement in Boss Watch. There is help wanted to stop bosses in Mississippi, where the U.S. Department of Labor investigators are seeking to interview employees at a Hattiesburg poultry plant as they continue their probe into the death of a 16-year-old worker in July of 2023. The Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration and Wage and Hour Division have opened workplace safety and child labor investigations at the Marjack Poultry, Mississippi plant. To aid the investigation, OSHA obtained a warrant from the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi to secure access to the Marjack facility and investigate safety hazards related to the incident. The warrant allowed federal officials to question any employer, operator, agent, or employee privately and to review records related to the operation and maintenance of the equipment involved in the incident. Employees at the Marjack Poultry Plant in Hattiesburg are asked to contact OSHA at 855-321-6742 or the Jackson area office at 601-965-4606. That's going to be it for us today, folks. On the first half of the show, we have a whole second half of the program that is online only. If you're listening to us on the radio, find us online, YouTube and Facebook. We're going to continue talking about the UAW situation. We've got on Luis Leon from Labor Notes to talk about his reporting. We're also going to take calls at 844-899-TVLR. It's going to be a great time in overtime, where we have a whole second half of the program. So, like I said, really appreciate everybody's time. TVLR.fm/donate to support the show. Come out to our live show tomorrow at Shenanigans Comedy Theater. Buy your tickets at TVLR.fm/store. VIP tickets get you in the door an hour early to chat with us and the guests. For the radio audience, until next week, solidarity. Okay. All right. We're off the radio. Off the radio now. Appreciate everybody's time. And thanks for sticking around with us. We've got 100 people still watching the show, 77 likes. If you haven't liked the stream, then please do that. And also subscribe to the program if you haven't yet. 844-899-TVLR is the number. 844-899-8857. 844-899-8857 if you want to call in. We're going to go ahead and take a really quick break and be right back with the second half of the program. We'll take calls at the beginning if anybody wants to call in. So do that if you want to get in as we start overtime. We're going to take a really quick break, get some water, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned, folks.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral air. You'll either be a union man or a thug party
Welcome back to the program. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show, where we are now in overtime. That's the second half of the program, where we are online only. We have freed ourselves from the shackles of the FCC censors. We appreciate you staying with us. We got a couple of callers in the queue. Let's go to 715 area code. There's a 715 area code in the queue. Let's bring them on the air. 715 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
My name is John. I'm calling from the Jackson area.
John from the Jackson area in Mississippi? John from the Jackson area.
Yeah.
Nice to hear from you, John. I don't know if you knew this, but Adam is from Mississippi.
That's right, from Meridian originally.
And what's funny is I'm not originally from here, but it's growing on me pretty quick. I like it down here.
There you go. There you go. Well, what's on your mind, John?
Well, I work for the UAW down here. I work for General Motors, the CCA, and the Jackson PDC.
Yeah. Well, how are you feeling about everything that's going on, and how's folks in your workplace feeling about it?
There's a lot of, I'd say, we've been anxiously awaiting every update. I'll say that. I wish that it was a little bit. I know that it's more clear now than it ever has been. What's going on during negotiations, what's going on, what we're actually fighting for. It's more clear now than it's ever been. I know that. It's more transparent. And we love that Sean Fain's been keeping us clued in. But we are also completely in the dark, just like everybody else, as far as when and what is happening. Like, we didn't know until 3 minutes before that 9 o'clock live stream when we all got a text saying, what 3 plants were going out.
Right.
And it feels weird to be part of that movement when you don't know what's coming. You don't know when it's going to happen. We have no idea if, we're going to get a text in the middle of the workday coming up where we're all going to have to just all of a sudden drop what we're doing and walk out. Mm-hmm. We have no idea if someone from our representation is going to get a direct word from up on high to come to the plant and walk us out. We don't know how that's going to work out.
Right.
So we're anxiously awaiting information is what I'd say the general feeling is. But we're all real happy about finally standing up, finally asking for what we deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine that, and I absolutely understand, and this is a totally a totally separate thing from the people who are saying this is this maneuver is like a sellout thing or whatever. But I think that's ridiculous. But what you're saying it totally makes sense, that it would be it would make me a little anxious, not knowing, day to day, okay, am I going to go on strike today? Am I going to go on strike today? So I certainly understand that and appreciate that. But it's good to hear that, that folks, even down in Mississippi, people tell us here in Alabama that folks in the South don't want to stand up for themselves, that they don't want to, they just want to do whatever the bosses tell them. So it's good to hear that folks down in Mississippi are happy that their leadership's standing up for them, and that they're being given the chance to stand up for themselves too.
Absolutely.
You're how long have you been working for CCA?
I'm incredibly fresh. I've only got 2 years at the plant, and I was very lucky. I was extremely lucky. I'm one of the few people that after 90 days was able to be hired. Wow. That's not typical from temp to full time. That is not typical. I was incredibly lucky. And before me, I was told that before I came in, there was people that were working there for years and then just got let go. And that was just the case. That was just how it worked on rotation. And then I was one of the first waves of people that broke that cycle. So I was extremely fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's great to hear. And, what you were saying about kind of being kept in the loop, it made me think about when I was on the picket line with GM workers in 2019. I didn't work at GM, but I've been a union member for longer than that, and so I went to be I went on the picket line with them when they went on strike back in 2019, and it is absolutely it's very, very different now than it was back then. When I was asking them, so what are the strike issues, right? They couldn't tell me, because they didn't know. The bargaining committee wasn't telling them. They were just telling them that the company isn't where they need to be. And, it says something about the membership that they were willing to trust their leadership that much and that they were willing to go on strike over that. But, I don't think that they should have to do that. I think that they should be able to know what they're striking over. So, that made me think of that from 2019. It was kind of odd hearing that.
Absolutely. We couldn't be happier. I can't be happier actually knowing what my leadership is fighting for. Hearing him say that, he wants to end tears, at working at a CCA is absolutely not on par with manufacturing. When you hear like all these offers that are coming out from the companies, when you hear like they want to increase wages 20%, as a CCA worker in that tier of pay, in that tier of work, I have absolutely no idea if that 20% is actually going to apply to me, because they're just saying a blanket statement. And in the past, those blanket statements have been tied to also CCA workers will just get a 2% raise, not this 20, or something along those. That has been the language they use in the actual contract. So what they're saying in the media is only, from what I understand, and from my limited experience with reading through the negotiations from 2019, the contract that I'm in under, it seems that CCAs and GMCH plants are very much an afterthought to the overall GM business plan. So we always have to take everything they're saying on TV and all those offers, we have to take those with a grain of salt.
Yep, absolutely. Well, best of luck to y'all, and absolutely CCA workers deserve more than they're getting. Appreciate the call, John.
I appreciate you talking about it. Thanks.
Yep. We got another caller in the queue. This one is from a 734 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 734 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, man? My name is Darnell. I'm calling from Michigan.
Darnell from Michigan. I think I saw your name in the chat. You are one of them that's on strike right now, right?
Yes, sir.
And you sent a $1 super chat. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So, yeah, brother, you're on strike right now over in Michigan. What? Tell us about it.
Man, it's kind of I'm excited, nerve-wracking, because I'm fresh. Only been working for a couple months. And
wow, really?
That day that we knew we was gonna be on strike was. I never experienced nothing like that in my life, man. The whole building, the atmosphere was crazy. Like, they let us go home early, hour early. We supposed to go home at 12, but they made us go home at 11 to avoid the news. It was a lot of helicopters above us. It was pretty crazy, man.
That's awesome. That's great.
I'm curious, I'm curious about the emotions that that y'all were experiencing at that time, and like what you were witnessing from your coworkers.
Man, I can say me personally, man, like my heart was pounding because I got a text, like the last guy said, I got a text like at 9, letting us know that we was gonna be one of the plants. So a lot of people around me while we on the line, because I put on rear doors. I work in the trim department, so I put on the rear doors, and on the right side, and the people around me, they haven't received a text message yet, so they stopped the line, and a lot of my team leaders and supervisors was just running around. I was showing a lot of people text messages. They still weren't believing me until Sean Fain actually went live PM that night and said our building, our location. And he only actually said the department I work in, which is final and paint. Body and stamping, they was not on strike, but they just got laid off yesterday.
Wow.
Because we are not allowed to work.
Gotcha. Yeah, that must have been that must have been fun seeing the supervisors run around.
Yeah, it was pretty, man. It was, like I said, I was nervous and excited at the same time because I know we was making history and I don't know what's next. Like, I got a 4-year-old son. I actually work at 2 jobs now because I'm a temporary worker. So I'm working at 4 and working somewhere else just to survive and take care of me and my kids and my family. So.
Yeah, well, now hold on, Darnell. People tell me that UAW members have it good and that they're basically wealthy, like in the top 1%. How is it that you're working 2 jobs?
Man, I can tell those people this. During the morning, I'm working at a warehouse driving a high-low. I leave straight from that job, go to my Ford plant, and I put on rear doors. So I'm barely getting sleep.
And
it's been very tough.
It's just unfortunate because I know you're not the only one. You're not the only one, and I'm sure there are many of your brothers and sisters out there, with a similar story and a similar experience. And we know these companies can afford to do better by y'all, the folks who are producing the profits. So I just want to send you, all the love and solidarity I can from Alabama. Michigan may seem far away, but we got your back however we can, and appreciate what you're doing because, like you said, you are making history and standing up for, not just the members of the UAW, but I would argue all of America, all of American working class folks in this country.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I actually just left the Union Hall, by the way, 30 minutes ago, and I seen my sisters and brothers out there. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I saw a couple of pictures of some folks lining up to get their strike checks already.
Yeah, we won't receive a strike pay until 8 days from now. But I know we are I had to go to the Union Hall today to register to receive our strike pay. So when that day comes, you can either get direct deposit or it can come in the mail. But nobody won't be receiving no money till 8 days from when you strike.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Darnell, was there anything else that you wanted to say or talk about?
No, man. That's it. I appreciate you guys so much today.
Hey, brother. Thanks. Keep it up, and feel free to call back in next week.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, it's tough. There are so many workers out there who are in that situation, who are working multiple jobs to get by. They're trying to take care of their family. And that's something that we ought to all be able to agree on, right? That folks want to be able to take care of their family, have a decent living, be able to go to the doctor when they need to go to a doctor, be able to get medication when they need medication. It's not a lot to ask. And it's not a lot to ask that if you're going to have temporary workers, that they be temporary. 90 days, that seems like a reasonable temporary period. But 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, that's just totally unreasonable. And, something we did this week that was really interesting was we spoke to labor leaders from other countries. We spoke to labor leaders from Zambia and Indonesia, and we'll be, using some of that footage at some point later down the road. But something that really stood out to me in our conversation was how many of these same issues workers are fighting everywhere, right? It's not just the UAW members who are fighting against the use of temporary contracts. It's not just the UAW who's fighting to return the retirement pension and fighting for their retirees. All right, these are worker issues that are spanning the country and spanning the globe.
Yeah.
And so, it's an important fight. It's an inspiring fight. and we have their back. And I'm really just wishing them all the best. And I think you laid it out earlier. There's no question that the companies can afford this. It's not a question of whether or not they deserve it. The workers created the profits, so it doesn't matter what you think in terms of who deserves what. Without those workers, there would be no profits. There wouldn't have been $250 billion in profits over the past decade, right? Yep. That only happens because of labor. So it's time that labor get its share.
Absolutely. I do want to just mention, I saw a chat earlier asking if you were wearing a People's Party shirt. And no, Adam is not wearing a People's Party shirt. He is wearing a shirt of Alabama Arise, which is a Alabama-based nonprofit think tank / research and
community
advocacy
coalition. Yeah, absolutely, doing good work. But the People's Party, that's interesting. Yeah,
it's not really that interesting.
Okay.
Or, well, it's interesting because they're so weird.
Gotcha.
Luis Leon is going to be our next guest. Is he in the Zoom?
You know what? Let me check. I do not see him in the Zoom.
Okay.
I do not see him in the Zoom yet, so we'll see.
That is fine. He has been really all over.
Very busy.
Very, very busy.
And doing some great work. So yeah, if you haven't checked out some of his reporting lately, definitely do that. I'm signed up for what they call the Troublemakers Dispatch that Labor Notes sends out to your inbox every week. And so got the email yesterday, I guess it was, with all of their big three coverage. Some really good stuff. You had the piece from Luis. You had another piece that they put out about how you can support the UAW. Obviously, getting to your nearest picket line is one of the ways you can support. But there's only 3 plants on strike right now, so it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone in the country right now. In that article, there was actually a phone number that was listed where you can leave a message for the big 3 CEOs. So I did leave my sternly worded message for the executives. Hope they get it. I would encourage people to do the same.
Awesome. Well, while we're waiting for Luis, we did get another caller. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. This caller is from a 313 area code. 313 area code. What is what's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm James. I'm calling from Wayne, man.
James from Wayne. Is that Michigan?
Yeah, Wayne, Michigan. Yeah, well, I work out of the plant, the Michigan, the plant on Michigan Ave, the one that's on strike right now.
Another UAW member on strike. It's good to hear from you, brother. Appreciate you calling in and appreciate you going on strike for yourself and your fellow workers and like Adam said earlier, and for in our opinion, the American working class.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. I ain't called up to take up too much of you guys' time, man. I just want to encourage all the union members to stand strong. We're going to get through this, man, and just don't worry, man. Just we got to stick together right now. It's no more to be said. That's it. That's all, man. We got to take back what's ours, man. So I just want to encourage everybody: don't get discouraged and stay strong during these hard times, man.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for having me up, man. Thank you. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Hey, man, you too. Thanks.
Appreciate you, brother.
Feel free to call back in anytime.
Absolutely, yeah. Stay strong and really appreciate that message. Absolutely, solidarity is key. Y'all look out for one another, have each other's back. I think that's going to be really critical for the days ahead. Like you said, stay strong and stay together. That's important.
And just let me know whenever Luis jumps in the Zoom. And we've got plenty of stuff to talk about, though. We've been talking about yellow for the last few months. The Teamsters have been in the news, particularly with their fight with UPS, where they won a really big contract.
A historic number of UPS Teamster members voted at all, and then also voted in favor of the contract. So a lot of support for that contract, a lot of wins in that contract. But another big story with the Teamsters was their fight with Yellow, which is a less than truckload trucking company that went bankrupt recently due to the mismanagement of the executives who had made financial decisions without the input of the workers, financial decisions that led to the ruination of the company, financial decisions like acquiring competitors when they didn't need to be taking on loans to do that. And then after they acquired the competitors, they did not integrate their operations into Yellow's profile. So they had multiple companies within their portfolio who continued to compete against one another, trying to undercut each other instead of working together. And also, one of the financial decisions that Yellow made that led to the ruination of the company was keeping their prices much lower than industry standard. That's one of the reasons why they were not able to consistently turn a profit, is because their prices were so low. Despite all of their debt, despite the costs that are associated with the running of the company, their prices were just ridiculously low. So they went bankrupt due to mismanagement, and management has been trying to blame it on the workers, blame it on the Teamsters. It's the Teamsters' fault. It's the greedy Teamsters' fault that we went bankrupt, despite the fact that over the last 10 years, Teamsters members gave $5 billion in givebacks to this company in concessions. $5 billion between 20,000 employees. That means over the last 10 years, these workers gave each $250,000 to this company to keep it running, right? And that's the thing that is so frustrating about all of these narratives about the Teamsters bankrupting Yellow or the UAW bankrupting the big three automakers. Whenever there is genuinely a crisis at the company, workers are there to provide for it. Workers make sacrifices to keep their employers afloat. Every day, every year, every time there's a crisis, workers sacrifice. And the people at the top don't. And that's what happened here. The Teamsters sacrificed. They took huge concessions in their contracts to try to save the company. And the company also got loans to try to help pay for their debt. I don't know exactly how that works. They got a huge, almost $1 billion loan from the U.S. government that because the Trump administration was the one that gave them this loan, the U.S. government came last in line in the list of creditors. So the U.S. government said, oh no, if something were to happen, you don't have to pay us back first. You can pay back these goons on Wall Street first that you've also taken almost $1 billion loan from. But you do have to pay us back before you pay the workers. And so that's what happened. They got all sorts of loans. They got all sorts of people trying to help them out, and they still couldn't make it work. And new information just came out last week from Bloomberg. Yellow paid bonuses totaling almost $5 million to 8 current and 2 former executives in the weeks before the company went bankrupt, with plans to liquidate, according to corporate disclosures in Delaware bankruptcy court. Of the bonuses dispersed, nearly $2 million paid on July the 14th were approved by Yellow's board in June when the company was in trouble, but before it was considering filing for bankruptcy. And so while all this is happening, while they're saying the Teamsters is greedy, all of this coming out in the media, they're making their media rounds trying to convince the public that the Teamsters, that the people who actually create what value is in this company, they're trying to convince people that these are greedy, these are the people that are making us bankrupt. They are approving for themselves millions of dollars in bonuses
in bonuses for bankrupting the company. I mean, that is the backwards logic of capital, right? Oh, the people who make maybe $100,000 a year, but who work, days on end, driving all across the country, they're greedy. But me approving a $1 million bonus for myself for bankrupting the company, that's just business. That's natural. The July payments include a $1 million retention bonus to Yellow Chief Restructuring Officer Matthew Dehaney, $1.08 million to Chief Operating Officer Daryl Harris, and $625,000 to Chief Executive Officer Darren Hawkins. Sean O'Brien, president of the Teamsters, said Yellow approved millions in executive bonuses in June at the same exact time they were voluntarily choosing not to pay millions in worker benefits to central states. That was one of the issues that leading up to the bankruptcy, is that Yellow was saying, no, we're not going to pay for your health care and pensions like we promised to, like we agreed to in the contract, like we're just not going to pay it at the same time that they're approving these $1 million bonuses. Absolutely crazy. So, there's another example of corporate greed for you. You just cannot sate the appetite of these people. So there you go. Adam, I heard you typing away. Were you talking to Luis in the Zoom chat?
That's right, yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, really excited about this interview. Like we said, Luis has been all over all of this stuff about the UAW. He has written in The American Prospect. Got a lot of respect for them. Talking about U.S. auto workers, the contract talks, and Stellantis threatening to move south to the non-union South. He wrote In These Times about the clean energy auto economy. He wrote for Labor Notes as the strike was happening, Lots of stuff. And, despite all of that, Luis tells me that he has been able to consistently get between 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Isn't that right, Luis?
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's the reason for all the typos on my tweets. I'm getting as you can see, here's this bed. I slept so long. I just woke up. Thanks for inviting me, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you for talking to us. And obviously that was a joke. Luis has been on the picket lines at all hours of the nights, and we really appreciate him taking the time to talk to us. And so before, I want to go into some of this background reporting because it's really important to what is happening right now. But before we kind of back up, let's talk about what's happening right now. You've been on picket lines, multiple picket lines. You've been talking to probably at this point dozens of striking workers and workers at plants presumably that have not been striking. What is the general feeling? We've actually already had a couple of callers that have been striking, and then one caller that is at a non-struck facility. And everybody so far excited to strike. The fellow who's not in a struck facility right now said that he's anxious about not knowing when he's going to strike, but really excited generally about kind of the way things are going, appreciative of being, stood up for, of being kept in the loop, that kind of stuff. How does the three callers that we've had so far this morning, how does that map onto what you're seeing?
Yeah, no, people are fired up. They're standing up to corporate greed, and the labor movement is standing with them. So it's really exciting. What I'm hearing is that, in the plants that people haven't struck yet, they're taking some creative tactics into consideration, including, not working voluntary overtime, slowing down production in that way. And this is part of the stand-up strategy, right? It unleashes the rank and file to take initiative. It makes negotiations unpredictable. As you know, as a union brother, that, when you go into bargaining, some of these things are really boring. It's a lot. And sometimes people think that all the action happens at the bargaining table. What we're seeing right now is that the action actually happens at these picket lines. It happens at the shop floor level. Right. So we saw already the impact that the stand-up strike has had, that the companies have laid off workers as a counterattack against the union to dampen the morale that you're seeing all over the country. People are excited. Even President Obama, the former deporter in chief, maybe Biden, depending on how he stands, he'll become the union buster in chief. Let's see if he does what's right and stands for the workers. So far, he's saying some good things, but the evidence will be in how he responds to these EV subsidies that he's giving these corporations. So kind of looping back to your point, though, because I am sleep deprived. I think it's an amazing thing that we're seeing. We're seeing class-wide demands in the front pages of newspapers all over the country, even though we're seeing some crank talk about second guessing this strategy. The corporations are not second guessing it. They're responding, and they're responding with a counterattack against the workers. And we need to stand with workers and lift up the demands that they're making, because as Sean Fain has said, they're not only fighting for auto workers, they're fighting for the whole working class.
Absolutely. And, speaking of the strategy, you said that there's been some cranks that have been second guessing it. And, we've got a couple of clips from some brilliant minds on YouTube who are, really, the UAW should be looking on, just searching on YouTube for their next strategists, because these are the brilliant minds, right? But how are workers responding generally to the strategy, you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, right? Because here's the thing. The strategy is intended to throw off the companies, right? Make it unpredictable for them. They don't know what plan is going to be struck. The industry mouthpiece, Automotive News, thank you for your labor. They actually misled the companies into thinking the transmission plans were going to be struck, and the companies started stockpiling there. So they were totally unprepared, for what the strategy was. But in that level, when you introduce confusion as part of your strategy, in this case, the boss always seeks to divide us and confuse us. What the union has done is it has turned that tactic against the boss. And now the bosses are the ones that are confused and scrambling, trying to figure out what's happening next. In These Times put out a great story confirming that Stellantis had no idea what plants were going to be struck. But on the flip side, workers can also be confused. There can be FOMO. So in the history of the UAW, there's no shortage of militancy. During the 2019 GM strike, workers were out there on the picket line. They didn't know why the hell they were out there. It's not like now where they have members' demands that are out there and people can talk to you. We're fighting for pensions. We're fighting to eliminate 2 tiers. We're fighting for the whole working class. We're fighting for a shorter work week. There are clear demands that the membership is pushing. That was not the case in 2019. And your listeners can go back to Labor Notes and read some of that coverage where it shows, that confusion and workers feeling like there was nothing else that they could do. And the companies also used the corruption scandal against the union, and that just demoralized everyone, right? So now what we're seeing is that because there's a tradition of striking, there's FOMO. People may we want to do something, we're going to go out. So I was keeping my ear to the ground to see if there were going to be, I don't know, wildcats. Not wildcats, because technically they're working on their expired agreements, but I wanted to see if there was going to be something militant, kind of springing from the rank and file. The union has indicated that, they're not putting any shackles on the membership. The membership is been unleashed, as I said, and that's part of the strategy. So these CEOs better listen and make a deal that meets these members' demands, because who knows what's next. They're talking about eating the rich. I'd be really scared if I was at Ford, at Stellantis, at GM. The pitchforks are coming out.
Absolutely. And that's something else that's worth explaining. Working under an expired contract, does that mean that they now have no protections. They can be fired at will, and they can get demotions and pay cuts and take this all sorts of, they're just totally at the whim of the boss?
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to like say too much, but I'm gonna give your listeners a scoop, right? So if you're working under an expired agreement, the status quo still remains, right? So for instance, let's say that the company, these voluntary workers continue refusing voluntary overtime, right? And then they say, you know what? We're going to shift you over to mandatory overtime, so you can't refuse it. Well, that would be a violation of the contract because they can't change, conditions because they're working under an expired contract, right? So that will be something to look out for. And Labor Notes is going to be trying to follow that story to see if the union files charges, if the company attempts to do that, right? So they can't change, for instance, like ice machines. They can't do any of those things. So workers have a lot of power, right? But the UAW has a webpage, so I would encourage people to go to the Stand Up website and look at, and Benjamin Dichter, who's on the bargaining team, put out a video. So if you guys can cut into that video at some point, and show it, that would be the best way to educate members on it. But I don't want to say more than what I just said about the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just cause is still there.
Right. That's right. And what Dichter said in that video was that, the only thing different about how adjudicating discipline is that they don't have the binding arbitration at this point, but they can still take it, like you said, unfair labor practices to the NLRB. They can strike over disciplinary issues at this point because now there's no strike clause. But like you said, status quo prevails, and you're not an at-will employee still. They have to bargain over changes. So with that out of the way, let's actually kind of back up and do some of the background filling in for folks, because you have done an excellent job with that. For in particular, I'm thinking of your pieces for In These Times and The American Prospect. So let's start with the article that you wrote first for In These Times. Will the clean energy auto economy be built on factory floors riddled with toxic chemicals and safety hazards? Talk to us about, what you were looking at in that article.
Yeah, let me sneak in a sentence that was cut from something I wrote that I think your readers your listeners may appreciate. So in the United States, corporations are legally purported to be people. In Europe, they are gods. So the conglomerate Stellantis, a modern day version of the Roman god Saturn, as you mentioned earlier, these corporations have an insatiable appetite. This is what we're seeing, right? They just want to cannibalize the jobs of the American worker by shutting down plants, by making sure that these EV jobs are terrible jobs that don't provide the benefits and wages that generations of millions of American workers have fought for. So right now we're seeing that, these corporations are on a monopoly-seeking rampage, and they have only grown. So GM, right, has created a legal fiction by partnering with creating these joint ventures with other folks that have experience in the EV sector. And the reason why they've done that is because they don't want to fold those workers into the national GM agreement, right? They want to keep them separate. They want to they want to maintain tiers, right? Like this is another way of maintaining tiers and dividing the working class. So what you see in Ultium in Lordstown, a plant that's a stone's throw away from where the Lordstown assembly plant used to be, who, for your listeners, this happened under the Trump administration, where he made a lot of promises when he campaigned in Ohio, telling people, we're going to bring, we're going to keep jobs. We're going to do, so he's going on the record, talking about what he's going to do to save auto jobs, and it's all bullshit. It's a lie. Like the company that he actually supported to create jobs has just gone bankrupt. They had a partnership with Foxconn. And so people in the Rust Belt have experienced this since the 1970s. You know, the Ohio has hemorrhaged thousands of jobs, and this new plant was a shining example of the revitalization of the auto sector. And the UAW supports the transition to clean energy, but they just want to make sure that those jobs are good jobs, that they're safe jobs. So what I wrote about in these Times piece was, I would hope, I was aiming for the modern day jungle for the 21st century. Like people think of a factory floor and they think of it being loud, of it being dirty. I snuck into the lobby of OTM cells and it feels like a corporate office. But behind that corporate lobby, you know, workers talk about explosions. They talk about this chemical called electrolyte that basically, if it falls on your forearm, it burrows through your skin and tries to reach that calcium in your bones. Really scary stuff. And, you know, people had talked about some of the things that were happening at this plant, especially the local news channel had done a really good job doing what Labor Notes does best, which is talking to workers directly and hearing from their working conditions, right? Because it's not only about, you know, the wages matter, but it's about the control that we have over our conditions of work. And in this plant, workers didn't even have like respirators, right? They had like these little cloth masks. The fire department chief was scared, you know, to venture into the facility when calls came in because they didn't know like what chemicals were there. Like they didn't actually list the chemicals initially, which they're required to by OSHA. But we know that OSHA is toothless. The only guarantee for worker safety is the only guarantee that workers have for their safety is each other. We enforce our safety by becoming shop floor militants. And that's what the workers at OTM cells did, right? So they banded together when they didn't have showers, which were mandated by OSHA because of the chemicals they were dealing with, right? And they took action, and the company eventually installed showers. In other instances, you know, workers talked about like the way that this plant operates is like I describe them as like these vestibules that workers have to sometimes go in and remove, like if there's a jam, they have to go in and remove it. And in some instances, the managers have forgotten that the workers are inside and have tried to actually lock these machines. So really horrific working conditions. And, you know, the article was like so long, and I had hoped that more people would have picked up on it, because it gives you a real good sense of like what the EV transition could potentially be unless unions and the whole labor movement rallies together and demands more from the Biden administration, that our taxpayer dollars are actually going to corporations that are going to build these jobs, but these jobs must be good jobs and the safety standards need to be in place, right? So that's like a brief summary. And because my brain is fried, I started talking about Stellantis, which is not the company that is the joint partner at OTM Cells. That's General Motors. Stellantis is the company that shuttered the Belvedere plant. Right. And that's the American Prospect story. So sorry for my wires getting crossed, but we are live. You're getting the real deal.
Yeah, no worries at all. And so one of the things that, you know, about these battery makers, you know, you mentioned the low pay, unsafe working conditions, you know, really bad stuff. There is some attempt to fold them into the current master agreement that the UAW has with the big three, with the, you know, in this case, in the case of Ultium, it would be the master agreement that the UAW has with GM. And some U.S. senators have come out in support of this. What is the status on that? And can that happen? I know that there's some kind of like legal questions about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jacob. Thanks for bringing that up. So the union has been very careful to not say you must fold them into the master agreement. I don't know if in terms of bargaining language, I don't know if it doesn't fall under like a permissible subject of bargaining, right? Like it's a separate company. Like that's what I mean about it being a legal fiction, right? So it's important for people to understand that. There's been some misreporting out there, unfortunately, even in the American Prospect, about this question. So politicians can say fold them in. The union can say mirror the standards of of our GM contract. But that's a key point. So the person that has leverage here is Joe Biden. Like that's the reality, right? The truth of the matter is that Biden is giving these corporations oodles of cash, and he and the U.S. Congress are going to determine whether they're creating a factory floor that's riddled with hazardous conditions, and workers are getting locked in machines, and chemicals are bearing through their skin and destroying their bones, or are they going to create jobs that provide a middle-class standard of living for the working class of this country? That's the question. So for the folks that are tuning in, the union is aware that the EV transition is going to pose some challenges, because from what we know so far, and there are various reports out there, right, that it's going to require fewer workers. So here's where what is actually part of the bargaining is around plant closures. So there's Factory Zero here in Michigan, for instance, that GM has an electric plant here, an electric vehicle plant. So let's say GM wanted, I don't know, for whatever reason, this is a hypothetical. Let me not give hypotheticals, because that's not a good way to pose the question here. But the point is that in the event that there are plant closures as part of the EV transition, or they have to reduce the headcount, the union wants some safeguards, right, to make sure that there are jobs. And this is the thing, there's going to be a lot of investment, so there are going to be a lot of jobs produced. The question is, what kind of jobs, right? So it's a tricky question, because the union is bargaining over job security, right? Because there are some unionized workers already in these plants, including Spring Hill, for instance, in Tennessee. So that's my muddled way of describing that. Hope it's clear to your listeners.
No, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. And I think this is the last one that I wanted to talk about, and then feel free if there's something else that you feel like is important, then feel free to jump in with it after this. But for the American Prospect, you talked about some of Stellantis's threats, and plant closures and relocation to Mexico is obviously a threat that we've seen. Jim Cramer say that the big three automakers should really go hard on. But moving to the non-union South without the new plants being automatically folded into the union is a big issue, and really would undermine the UAW members at other plants across the country. What's going on in this piece?
Yeah, no. So Stellantis, they used the euphemism for closing down the plant. They said that they indefinitely idled the Belvedere plant. So in my American Prospect piece, I tried to kind of give a feel for, like, how did we get here? What are the structural forces that are creating these plant closures? So sometimes, unfortunately, people buy into right-wing propaganda and the company talk about Mexican workers versus American workers. The reality is that these corporations are looking for safe havens of exploitation anywhere they can find them. So if they can maximally exploit the American worker, they're going to try to go to Mexico. If they can go to Mexico, they'll go somewhere else. So the idea is for workers to band together across borders to make sure there's no safe haven for exploitation for these corporations, right? So that's the upshot of the piece, is we need international solidarity to take on these global corporations. So just as they strategize across borders, we must strategize across borders to resist their efforts to drive down standards. So to put that in context, I talked a little bit about NAFTA and what happened during the implementation of NAFTA. So when NAFTA was negotiated, there were some concerns that it would create, that it would drive down standards, right? So they wanted to put in place some guarantees around environmental guarantees, standards, wage standards, so that the wage differential wasn't like as high. Labor Notes published a book in 1995 that showed that, you know, a U.S. auto workers was earning about $8.68. At that point, a Mexican auto worker was earning like $1, right? So these companies know that they have like an advantage, obviously, in relocating across the border, but it's also not just across the border. It's also the South, right? Right. So these companies, the transplants, have also been growing their footprint in the U.S. South, right? And they pose an existential threat to the UAW as well, because you cannot, what Stellantis in particular has tried to do is, and they did this in 2015, if you look at, there's this book called by this Wayne State professor, Marek Masters. He's a business guy, but he does like a good comparison, which is useful. We have to speak facts, you know, when we talk about this stuff. So you could see like how much Stellantis drove down like their costs to the non-union like sector, right? So what you're seeing right now is the opposite of that. So let's say the UAW gets a very lucrative historic agreement. If I were a worker working at Mercedes-Benz in Alabama, I would say, hey, I've been working at this plant. When is the UAW going to help us organize our union? You know, in Tennessee, I would be thinking the same thing if I were a Southern auto worker. In North Carolina. So there's a potential here to beat back these bastions of exploitation within the United States. And then there is Mexico as well. So one thing that my piece tries to also highlight is that the Mexican workers are actually really highly skilled, right? So sometimes you hear a lot of bullshit, right-wing, racist shit, fascist talking shit about the Mexican worker, right? The Mexican worker is just as skilled as the American worker. They just have poorer wages and worse working conditions. So the right thing to do as a labor movement is for us to fight to lift the floor for everybody.
Absolutely. And you have reported separately, and this is another piece. I mean, it's really just, I don't know when you're finding the time to sleep at all. I don't know if you are. But you reported on some Mexican workers in Mexico standing in solidarity with the UAW, saying that we are not going to be working mandatory overtime either. And particularly Israel Cervantes, I believe she is with the new independent union at a GM plant in Silao. And that kind of solidarity, you know, it's easier, and somehow we still haven't been able to do it in large part, but it's easier, you know, for an American auto worker to kind of say or believe that they're in solidarity, or that you know, the Mexican auto workers deserve better, and if they went on strike, it would, you know, wouldn't be too difficult for us to support them, you know, presumably, or it just doesn't seem like it should be. But I could see how it would be really easy for a Mexican auto worker to look at the U.S. auto workers and buy into that kind of right-wing framing that the American media want other American workers to buy into and say, look at how much more money the U.S. auto workers make than I do here in Mexico, and they're striking for even more. Why should I support them? But she's not doing that, and several and unions in Mexico, that union in particular in Mexico at GM is supporting the UAW. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Isaías Cervantes was a worker who was fired after he supported GM workers when they went on strike in 2019. He was also fired because he led a campaign against the company union that controlled that contract. The principal officer of Cintia, the independent union that eventually won an election there, and they were able to bargain a big wage boost for the workers last year. Her name is Alejandra Morales. She's the principal officer of Cintia. So they've put out statements in the past in support of U.S. auto workers. And Israel has been part of this worker center called Casa Obrera that has been trying to help other workers in the auto sector in a really repressive conservative state of Guanajuato organize. And so that he's going to be actually in Michigan on the 20th of September, and he's going to join workers, stand with them on the picket line in solidarity. One thing that I also like to mention about the efforts of Mexican workers, especially in the context of Belvedere. So there's another campaign that Labor Notes wrote about by workers at a auto parts plant called VU Manufacturing. The owners of that plant are actually based here in Troy, Michigan, not too far from where I'm staying. So the workers there, mainly women, led a historic campaign to form a genuine union. When they were trying to bargain with the company stonewalled, and ultimately they closed down the plant. They just completely closed down the plant. They blacklisted all the workers. Most of them now can't even find work in the sector that they've known their whole lives. They've all worked in these border factories. And right now, there's a real opportunity for the workers at Belvedere, whose plant was shuttered and the jobs, moved over to Toluca, Mexico, for those workers to come together in a really practical way and say to the world that an injury to one is an injury to all. And it's not just a mere slogan. Here's the evidence. Not only did Stellantis shutter this plant in Belvedere, but this other auto parts manufacturer did the same in Mexico. So here it tells you that it doesn't just go in south of the border. It can also flow north. So here's why I keep emphasizing this point about international solidarity and how crucial it will be for the UAW going forward to take the call of upholding that kind of political vision of a unified working class. It's not because it sounds nice. It's existential, and we need it. And we know that, like Chomsky likes to say, I love this quote, there's a one-sided class war. The Chamber of Commerce, the Republican Party, all these people are coordinating with one another to drive their agenda. The working class needs to do the same. We need to coordinate across borders so that the workers at VU, when they form a genuine union that holds the promise of lifting standards, the company doesn't say, in violation of the new trade pact, the USMCA, we're just going to move. We're going to close it down. Here's another area where the Biden administration is failing. They need to make sure that that company doesn't get away with that. They need to make an example of that company so that workers see that this administration is standing with the working class. So auto workers are not only standing up in the U.S., they're standing up in Mexico. Is Biden going to stand with them?
That's the question. Absolutely. And it was interesting.
Got a little emotional there.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you're right to be. And because this is, this is a huge deal, and it is very frustrating, when I hear people falling for some of this, some of the class war talking points from from the other side of the class war, and it's very frustrating. And I enjoyed seeing Sean Fain kind of hit back at Biden's weekly supportive comments. He said, I think the big three should do better, but he wasn't specific. He didn't make a commitment to, come on the picket line or anything like that. And Sean Fain said, I think that Joe Biden is scared. And I think that that's probably correct. So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep folks updated. And obviously, Luis will as well. So make sure that you're following him on Twitter, El Feliz Leon. Follow his work in Labor Notes, In These Times, The American Prospect, The Real News Network. He's in lots of places, as are other journalists covering this issue. Luis, is there anything else that you think you wanted to make sure that we spoke about before we let you go?
No, I wanted to make a pitch to all the Southern workers out there to support the Valley Labor Report. I really appreciate the work that you folks are doing. Labor Notes, supports you guys, and thank you for inviting me on, and carry on with the amazing work that you are all doing.
Appreciate it, brother. Thanks. It really means a lot. So like I said, Luis Leon, staff writer at Labor Notes. Make sure that you're subscribed to Labor Notes if you're not. We are, obviously. Labor Notes, and we're not just subscribers because Labor Notes is a sponsor of the program. We have been subscribers for, I think, years now. I don't know how long.
I
don't know. You've been probably a decade.
Probably. Yeah, it's probably been 10 years now. I have
Crazy.
learned a lot from them, and I always recommend their trainings that they provide.
Yep.
I can't recommend their coverage enough. Really appreciate what they're doing for the movement.
844-899-TVLR is the number, 844-899-8857. And we have a caller on the line who has been waiting patiently while we finished our interview with Luis. I appreciate it. That caller is from a 502 area code. Let's go ahead and bring the 502 area code on the air. 502 area code, what is your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Stan. I'm calling from Kentucky.
Stan from Kentucky. What's on your mind?
Hey, I think that what's not being addressed here is, and we're not just talking about pay when it comes to the UAW and our workers and our brothers and sisters there. We're talking about the amount of injuries that are taking place in the work environment of Ford. We're talking about people who have numerous surgeries for shoulder, carpal tunnel, knee replacements, hip replacements. It's a grueling job, and I hear the media, and the media is making it seem like we're so greedy. I wish one of those like fake wearing wig media personnel comes and works even a day, even a week there, and tell me how they're going to feel and how their body's going to feel. They don't put anything into consideration about what we're asking, and what we're asking for is fair. So It upsets me that this is not being discussed. The amount of injuries. If you go out, Ford would put out a report about all the surgeries that have been taking place, all the knee replacements, the hip replacements, everything that takes place, the injuries. They don't do that because they make it like we have a zero safety. Everybody's kumbaya. Nobody's getting injured, but that's not the fact. There's a lot of injuries. It's a grueling job.
Absolutely.
And nothing said about it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate that, and we talked some about that with Luis, but that was in particular to the Ultium plants, and the Ultium plants are obviously, the conditions are even worse there, right. But that doesn't mean that everything is hunky dory, like you said, at the Ford plants, and it's important for people to understand that because one of the things that Sean Fain has really been hitting on that I've liked hearing him is talking about how people are, when they're, working for these companies, they're selling their time and y'all want some more of that time back to spend with your families and to do, whatever the hell you want. Right. But also in addition to that, you're selling your time and your life, you're selling your bodies Like the physical well-being of your bodies is one of the things that you're selling to these companies. Like you said, and many people end up kind of drawing the short straw and getting injured and having surgeries and having life-altering surgeries, to make cars and make profits for these companies. And that absolutely has to be taken into consideration when people try to make it seem like y'all make too much money.
Yeah, and another thing is that when you do get injured at Ford, the amount of treatment you get from these supervisors, just the shameful look that they give you and how they treat you. You know, they'll have you sit there like a dog until they call you or fetch you over to sweep the floor or do something for them. It's the amount of disrespect that you put in 10, 15, 20 years and you get hurt because your back no longer take the amount of work that they're asking for on a daily, and you decide to go on a status of light duty or even go out and you come back, the amount of disrespect that is looked at that person, it's just shameful. It is shameful that somebody puts that much time in. So I just wanted to really bring that out. There's much more, but I'm going to leave it there, and you can get other callers because I waited a long time, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that my brothers and sisters want to get out there and put something out there also. So I'm going to let you go. I thank you for taking my call, and thank you for listening to me. I just want to put that out there so people can actually see that this is more than just money.
Absolutely.
So
you're absolutely right.
It.
I appreciate the call.
Yeah, I really do appreciate the call, and appreciate you lifting that up because you're right. Safety is so important, and I think you're right, Jacob. There should be a constant reflection on the fact that people are selling their physical well-being, and really coming at a cost.
Yeah. We do have another caller on the line. That caller is from a 304 area code. Caller from a 304 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 304 area code. What is your name, and where are you calling from?
Hey, Jacob. It's Jared from Local 27 IFPTE calling from Huntsville, but I retain my West Virginia phone number for good reason.
There you go. That's right. Jared, IFPTE Local 27. Folks, Jared, like he said, he's from Huntsville. We know each other. He's a good brother, represents member of the NASA union here in Huntsville. That's something that a lot of people don't know. NASA is unionized, and this is one of the rocket scientists making it happen. I appreciate you calling in, and you having a West Virginia area code is not incidental to the reason for your call.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. We were having some back and forth earlier in the week, and you did mention it earlier on the show today. But I'm an alumnus of West Virginia University, West Virginia born and raised, graduated from West Virginia with degrees in engineering and Russian studies, about 7 years ago now. And just yesterday, the Board of Governors and especially University President Elwood E. Gordon Gee decided to fix a budget shortfall that they've caused by ending a very large portion of the liberal arts programs, including the entirety of the World Languages Department, in addition to something like, I forget the exact number, but something like 150 faculty just yesterday.
Right. Yeah. What is their reasoning for this? Why are they saying that this has to happen?
They're doing typical business doublespeak where they're citing efficiency gains and needs for process improvement, and depending on which lie they've been called out on, they shift their story. They hired this consulting company, RPK Group, which is basically a McKinsey, to hide behind when they're doing this. But even worse than that is, Gordon Gee's got a history of this. He's done this at every university he's been at. He's been at Ohio State, he's been at Brown, he's been at Vanderbilt, and he just never gets punished for this until it's bad enough they kick him out. But then 8 to 10 months later, he's a president in another university somehow.
And what and so, you know, what is some of the pushback? You know, he's saying basically that, oh, we got to do this, corporate speak, we got to save money, blah, blah, blah. How are people responding to that? In what ways is it not true?
Well, for one, the programs that they're targeting are profitable, and then they're claiming that they're not profitable. And I'm using profitable just in, like, they bring in more money than they actually cost, because a lot of these liberal arts programs they have very low operational overhead, right?
Right.
You need some offices, you need some standard lecture halls with blackboards, projectors, etc., and good libraries and internet. And these are the programs they're targeting. Another thing that they've done is they've targeted some of the programs that WVU is kind of unique in offering. For those in the audience who have children who like to watch Sesame Street and, you know, Jim Henson style, you know, puppetry programs, West Virginia was one of two universities in the country that had a puppetry program, for example. They also have one of the best ceramics programs in the country, if not the best. I'm scrolling through. I'll send this to you later. It's the write-up from the Daily Athenaeum, which is the student newspaper. And, you know, it's a lot of, they're claiming they need to cut in order to be profitable. They're citing some programs just don't serve state needs. There's someone, I've given them contact information. I'm hoping they'll reach out to you. Her name is Maya Helm. She's got a tweet here. Academic programs with this high number of students that receive tuition waivers, quote, do not serve state needs. And that's coming from somebody in the administration. And it's like, for those of you who don't know, West Virginia University is not the only university in West Virginia, obviously. There's Marshall, there's Concord, there's Glenville State, which recently became a university. But West Virginia University is the university and cultural institution for the state. West Virginia's population is only about 2 million people. So, you know, down here in Bama, we've got, you know, University of Alabama, but it doesn't have the same cultural cachet because it's, you know, there are other large institutions that represent Alabama culturally in the zeitgeist. And also WVU is the only place where a lot of engineering programs, liberal arts programs, administrative programs, you know, like public accounting or public administration. It's the main law school in the state. It's got one of the larger medical programs in the state. And it's also the cultural representation in any form of like sports, right?
Right.
You know, it's, I'm still just processing it a lot. I apologize for rambling, but you know, it's the institution for a lot of West Virginians.
Right. Well, I appreciate you calling and kind of filling in some of the blanks for us there. I've been seeing a lot about it on Twitter, and I just haven't been able to take the time to dig into it. But it seems like a very totally unnecessary kind of attack on the public and on educators and higher education, and so you know. Definitely my thoughts are with everybody that this is affecting directly and indirectly.
Yeah, I'll keep forwarding contact information for some folks who might be able to do a better job describing the situation than I am. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not a coincidence that liberal arts was targeted. And, you know, that's a broader trend that we're seeing in higher education is that, you know, it's less desirable to study history and literature. You know, they're funneling folks away from that and funneling folks away from critical thinking as well.
Right. So here's another story that has been in the news. If you want to call in, phone number still open, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Actors and writers are on strike. Been on strike for a long time. Writers been on strike for a much longer time than the actors. The update on that story is that the writers are finally coming back to the table with more accurately, I apologize for that wording. That's not how I meant it to come out. The media companies are finally coming back to the table with the writers. The writers always been willing to negotiate. Media companies are the ones that have not been in good faith. But they're coming back to the table next week, and so hopefully we're getting closer to a resolution. Hopefully. And yet there are some people that have not been willing to wait for a resolution and have committed to crossing the picket line. Do you remember E.T.?
Yeah.
Adam? Drew
Sure.
Barrymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I used to think fondly of Drew Barrymore, just, as a casual observer for movies and stuff. Seemed like a nice person.
Seemed like a nice person. I even thought highly of her as recently as a few months ago when she did not attend some red carpet award show or whatever, because that's what the writers and the actors requested people do in solidarity with the strike. And so that made it even more confusing when a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, she came out with this statement, quote, I am making the choice. I'm sorry. She has a talk show, apparently, a daytime talk show. I had no idea, but apparently she does. The Drew Barrymore Show. Okay. Yeah. And so, unlike some daytime talk shows, the Drew Barrymore Show is unionized with the Writers Guild. It's a WGA show. And so the season ended before the strike began. And so it has not been on during the course of the strike. And so she came out with this statement a little while ago. Quote, I am making the choice to come back for the first time in this strike for our show that may have my name on it, but this is bigger than just me. I own this choice. We are in compliance with not discussing or promoting film and television that is struck of any kind. We launched live in a global pandemic. Our show was built for sensitive times and has only functioned through what the real world is going through in real time. I want to be there to provide what writers do so well, which is a way to bring us together or help us make sense of the human experience. Very lofty goals for the Drew Barrymore Show. I hope for a resolve for everyone as soon as possible. We have navigated difficult times since we first came on air, and so I take a step forward to start Season 4 once again with an astute humility. So she is claiming that by not discussing struck works, she is abiding by the terms of the actors' strike, and she is claiming that no WGA-covered writing will be happening during the show. But that is just absurd to believe. If you believe that, you're a fool. And, some people in the WGA have, and the WGA itself has taken to Twitter to say, that's not accurate. This is scamming. And some people, some WGA members have taken to Twitter to say she needs to have her cards revoked. She needs to have her membership. She needs to be expelled from the unions. Because and this was some random person on Twitter, right? Just some random WGA writer. She said, if I crossed the picket line and wrote for the Drew Barrymore Show and did exactly what she's doing right now, I would be expelled from the union and I would never be able to write in Hollywood again. But because she's famous, maybe she will be expelled. Who knows? But nothing has happened this time. And so she shouldn't have special treatment because she's famous. And so we're going to see what happens there. But Drew Barrymore is now a scab. That's unfortunate.
Very unfortunate.
She's not the only one, though. Bill Maher. We talked about Bill Maher last week. And so I guess he was kind of soft launching this scab arc that he's going through. Last week when we played a clip of him talking about how some of the writers' demands are, quote, kooky. Demands, like he said, making a living. That's what he said was kooky. So here's what Bill Maher said last week. Quote, real time is coming back, unfortunately. Now, he could have just ended it right there, and that's all he needed. But he
would
kept
have been
going.
an accurate sentence, yes. I despised his show. I despise just his whole demeanor. He is so stuck up and snobby.
Yeah.
You know, and like that's the thing. I can get along with pretty much every kind of person, you know, regardless of their beliefs or background, except for snobs.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I don't know, he rubs me the wrong way. And so, yeah, there was no need to bring him back as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. So real time, this is his quote from Twitter. Real time is coming back, unfortunately, sans rioters or rioting. Okay, sure. It has been 5 months, and it is time to bring people back to work. The rioters have important issues that I sympathize with and hope they are addressed to their satisfaction. But they are not the only people with issues, problems, or concerns. Despite some assistance from me, much of the staff is struggling mightily. We all were hopeful this would come to an end after Labor Day, but that day has come and gone, and there still seems to be nothing happening. I love my riders. I am one of them, but I'm not prepared to lose an entire year and see so many below-the-line people suffer so much. Oh, yeah. Bill Maher, famous for his advocacy for below-the-line people. I will honor the spirit of the strike by not doing a monologue, desk piece, new rules, or editorial, the written pieces that I am so proud of on Real Time. And I'll say it up front to the audience, the show I will be doing without my writers will not be as good as our normal show, full stop. But the heart of the show is an off-the-cuff panel discussion that aims to cut through the bullshit and predictable partisanship, and that will continue. The show will not disappoint. Yeah, it will absolutely disappoint because it's a scab show. And Real Time consistently has liberals and progressives and Democratic politicians. Bernie Sanders is even, not an infrequent guest on the Bill Maher show. And so, we got to keep an eye out, unions and the Democrats, if they want to pretend to care about unions, they got to keep an eye out on who goes on this show because you can't cross the picket line. I don't care how many people you think that you'll be able to reach by crossing the picket line and talking about your message. You can't do it. Can't scab. Not acceptable. So that's where Bill Maher is. And as a result of this, like Twitter sometimes does, there was some old dirt that came out about Bill Maher that I felt like would be worth checking out. And so this first one is more lighthearted. And the second clip is really kind of freaking weird. Really pretty gross. But the first clip is just extremely funny because he is made to look like a fool by professional wrestler Rowdy Roddy Piper back in the 90s.
Oh, goodness. One of my favorites.
There you go.
One of my favorites from back in the day.
Yeah, biggest anime crossover in history. Okay, so let's take a look at Rowdy Roddy Piper on Bill Maher's old show, Politically Incorrect.
Are in on the today's audience watches wrestling, and they are in on the joke. That's not an insult.
So what you're trying to say is people are just dying for this.
I take it as an insult, too.
I do, too. But they're dying to find out, wrestling's fake.
Then you're telling me that you're really hitting each other?
No.
The sound of the chair is real, okay? We are entertainment, but when a metal chair cracks your back, that's not fake.
Somebody throws you from...
It's a metal...
Yes, there's never a bruise on any of you.
Bologna, you got a minute? Look at that. No.
Metal hip. Broken wrist. See that wrist? 7 years it's been broken. Owen Hart, dead. Why don't you go tell Mrs. Hart what a joke it is, huh? Oh, it's just a phrase, right? You want me to be truthful with you? Huh, champ? You know what, if I may say so, sir, the difference is...
What?
He's going to strike.
Just don't show me your ass again.
Listen, I ain't backstage, man.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not dropping my pants in front of other men, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, how'd you get the job?
Okay. So, there you go.
Extremely funny. Very gratifying clip to see a scab put in his place. Somebody in the chat says, I remember this. Do you remember this from Twitter last week, or do you remember this from the 90s?
Yeah, that was a little before my time. I vaguely, when I was a child, vaguely remember Bill Maher being on TV, But shout out Jacob Jones. I was so about to go there with They Live, one of the most underrated movies ever made. John Carpenter, great film, has a really great political message to it, actually. It's like, on the surface, it's kind of a cheesy, almost B-level sci-fi movie in the 80s, but it's really a very sophisticated takedown of Reaganism, and also features Rowdy Piper kicking some ass for quite a few minutes at a time.
Hell yeah.
There's an extended fight sequence there that South Park later parodied. It's a great movie. They Live. So if you get nothing else out of today's episode besides being fired up for the UAW strike and expressing your solidarity for UAW, you can also check out They Live.
Hell yeah. So like I said, this one though is like really, Bill in this clip is defending rape. Just really kind of disgusting stuff. So let's play this clip and, scab rape defender, Bill Maher.
Magazine agrees with me because they put her on the cover, Mary Kay Letourneau, the teacher from Seattle, who is in jail because she is in love. That's how I view it. I admit that it's unorthodox. She is 35. The boy is 14. He was younger when they started. But the big story this week...
Has he been bar mitzvahed?
Have I?
No, is he?
Oh. Okay. But she is pregnant again. That was the story this week. With the second child by this boy. So basically they're having a family and they're keeping the mother in jail because she won't conform to what society feels should be the perfect American family.
Is that why they did it?
That's why. They said, look, lady, you don't conform, so we're going to put you in jail. Think about that. He's talking about at this point, 35-year-old and a 14-year-old, and this is the second pregnancy. So the first one had to have been when the boy was 12, right? It takes time to get pregnant again.
12 seems to come to mind. Yeah, it's been a while since I've read anything about that case.
I don't know anything about that case.
Okay, it was a big deal, when I was a kid. So I vaguely remember it just kind of growing up. But I'm not surprised to hear that from Bill, though.
So somebody on Twitter, they shared it on Twitter, and so they had like a little something about it. Here's Bill defending statutory rape, and so I was expecting it to be, still statutory rape, but, more in like a gray area, like a 22-year-old teacher and a 17-year-old student or something. Like that still wouldn't be acceptable because of like the power dynamics and the teacher and the student relationship and all that kind of stuff. But, it's like, You
expected him to be...
Right.
Yeah.
I expected,
I understand what you're saying.
That's what I was expecting. But that is, talk a 33-year-old and a 12-year-old? Like, that's rape. That's just rape. That's not, not conforming. That is sick. So there you go. Scab and rape defender Bill Maher. But
he's said some very disgusting things on his show over the years. Mm-hmm. He's been on TV for a long time, and I get it. We're on the radio every week, and you say a lot of things, but I've never said hate speech against Muslims or condoned rape or any of the other disgusting things he's done.
Yeah. Really, really kind of wild stuff. But, to wrap this segment up, I want to, we can kind of come back around to Drew Barrymore, and I'll give you some good news. She came out last week with an apology video for saying initially that she would come back. So let's play this first clip from her apology video.
And I just want everyone to know my intentions have never been in a place to upset or hurt anyone. It's not who I am. I've been through so many ups and downs in my life. And this is one of them. I deeply apologize to writers. I deeply apologize to unions. I deeply apologize.
So there we go, Adam. She is deeply apologetic, and
I could get used to this, where people have to, with teary eyes, apologize to the unions.
Yeah, apologize to the unions.
More of this media. For
and
me,
so, so you know, presumably this means that she is not going to be coming back with her show. And so let's play this clip from the same apology video where she deeply apologizes to unions, and she's crying because she's so sad to unions. And so let's play this clip where she talks about the status of the show.
And I weighed the scales and I thought, if we could go on during a global pandemic and everything that the world has experienced through 2020, why would this sideline us? So I want to just put one foot in front of the other and make a show that's there for people, regardless of anything else that's happening in the world, because that's when I think we all need something that wants to be there.
Adam, did I mishear, or does it sound like she's still going to do her show?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like she's going to continue to do the thing that she apologized for. And it's because her show is so vitally important to the American people.
Yeah, right.
I was not aware that we were all on pins and needles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got such multiple layers of crisis impacting our society, right? We've got the existential threat of climate change, skyrocketing wealth and income inequality, global tensions throughout the world, nuclear weapons, viruses. We have all these issues and these layers of crisis bearing down upon civilization, and
that's why we need the Drew Barrymore show.
That's why Drew Barrymore's show has to continue, right?
Right. Why would she let it sideline us?
Consider the times that we're in, these trying times that we're in. How do we continue without Drew Barrymore on the air?
Yeah.
So
I mean, she's really making a sacrifice by.
One could put it that way. Yeah, that's true.
So there you go.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So we're already past time, and I've got like 3 more segments that I wanted to do. Adam, do you need to? Are you good to go, or do you want to go ahead and? Just
I actually I do have work after this, and so I can't go too long. I know we had some. I think we had some requests for that particular CEO.
Yeah.
We had some popular requests for that one, so I think maybe we close out on
we'll
that.
We'll close out on that one. As much as I want to respond to YouTube idiots being dumb on YouTube, I can't. We're not going to have time for that. Maybe next week. But I will say that one of them was live last night, and Adam, I can't stand for people to be wrong on the internet, and so I spend too much time correcting people who are wrong on the internet, and so I called into her show, and I don't think she really learned a whole lot, but
well, that's unfortunate, you know.
But let's go ahead and play this. So this CEO guy, is at a property summit. Put together by the Financial Review, talking to a bunch of business owners and developers and freaks. And here's what he had to say about the current state of the world economy.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided that they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, And we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
I mean, can you imagine the nerve of this guy? Like, this guy makes his money because he has money. He doesn't labor. He doesn't create. He doesn't work. He has money, so he makes money. And so he sees people who want to work a little less, who want to make a little more, and he sees that as a threat to his bottom line, and he can't stand the idea that tradies, and I don't know if that's like a derogatory term in Australia. He's Australian. IBEW members call themselves Sparkies. So, but it sounds derogatory, calling them tradies. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But the idea that the tradies are too uppity while people like him pull down millions of dollars from the economy every year for doing nothing is sickening. It's absolutely sickening. And now, I don't know if you know, Adam, but this guy is the avocado toast guy.
As in, he started that whole shtick.
He is the guy who started the thing about, and he wrote an op-ed in 2017 that said, the title was, if millennials want to own a home, they should stop spending $20 on avocado toast. It started with, I just figured it was like something stupid. Like I didn't actually think that there was somebody sincerely making this argument at any point. I thought that talking about, if you want to own a home, stop buying avocado toast. I thought that was just a satiric distillation of the hyper-individualistic financial advice that is not very applicable and would not actually work, but that we get all the time in this economy. I didn't actually think that there was a guy that did that started that, right? I thought it was just a satiric kind of distillation of the archetypal argument. But no, it was a thing that a person said who, again, pulls down millions of dollars every year and put pen to paper, fingers to buttons, and put out into the world, and was willing to have his name attached to it. That's this guy. And now he's talking about how people need pain in the economy. I mean, when you're talking about people, a 40 to 50% increase in the unemployment rate, he is literally calling for people to die.
Mass misery.
And yet, if people come back and say things, if people were to come back and physically threaten him, not actually do anything yet, although he is actually potentially even behind some doing of that, some actually executing this misery upon people. But if somebody else actually just verbally threatened him with physical assault or something, they would be sent to jail. But this guy can just sit up on a stage and call for, and probably be doing behind the scenes, call for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, the misery of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions more, the destruction of the economy, and yet he's not going to go to prison. He can just do that, just call for violence to people, and it's normal. again, this is the topsy-turvy world that we live under in a capitalist system, where people at the top have total unilateral authority to do whatever they want, inflict however much violence and pain they want on normal and working people, and we have to sit by and take it because that's just how things are. And if you try to do anything about it, then you're a radical and you're a dissident, and maybe you're even calling for violence, and you need to be shut up and you need to be put in prison. Insane. Really, really insane stuff.
It is, but I honestly appreciate when folks in the ruling elite are honest and kind of just let the mask off and keep it real for a moment. This is his Marie Antoinette moment, and if there's any justice in this long march of history, there will come a day where maybe his little picture will be next to Marie Antoinette's in a museum somewhere when we all look back on those wild times when we let an elite oligarchy control our world and our planet, and our economy and our society. So I'm just going to hold on to that hope.
Yeah. He did apologize over the call for more unemployment to fix worker attitudes later, which this is almost even just grosser. Like, screw you. And take your lumps, right?
No, don't apologize. You were being real. You were being honest about how you feel. What was it? I think it was Sam Sachs who said it was like he read Karl Marx and sympathized with the capitalist.
Right. I think that's another. Luis quoted Chomsky earlier in the program, and I think that's another Chomsky quote is that the elites are vulgar Marxists that just with the values reversed.
Right. Absolutely. So
So here's what he said. Mr. Garner, this is from the BBC, said later that he, quote, deeply regrets the comments. Man, people are feeling a lot of deep regret and apology today. He said, let's see. Later in a post on LinkedIn, he said that he had quote, made some remarks about unemployment and productivity in Australia that I deeply regret and were wrong. He said there were, quote, important conversations to have in this environment of high inflation, pricing pressures on housing and rentals due to lack of supply and other cost of living issues. He said his comments were, quote, deeply insensitive to employees, to tradespeople and families across Australia who are affected by cost of living pressures and job losses. Mr. Garner added that he appreciated that the loss of a job, quote, has a profound impact on workers, quote, and I sincerely regret that my words did not convey empathy for those in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about arrogance, that workers have arrogance because they're looking for a little bit more time, or that they're looking for a little bit better pay, or they're looking for better benefits because they want to go to the doctor, or they want to retire with dignity, they want to be able to send their kids to college, that's arrogant.
Right.
That's really something. And of course there's going to be bootlickers out there who agree with that. People who are not on the top, but for various reasons, sympathize with those who are. And that's always a frustrating thing. But when normal people lose their jobs, it's a very different experience than, someone like him. Someone like him can fail upwards. Right? He could lose his job tomorrow, and he's got enough money, enough assets to where he's going to be okay for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He's never going to have to worry whether the lights are going to be cut off, whether he'll have groceries that weekend, whether he can afford the medication that he's prescribed. He'll never have to worry about that, whereas 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Wealthiest country in the history of planet Earth. 60% of our people are paycheck to paycheck, and living under that stress and living under that anxiety. And so, it's very revealing, and I'm glad when the ruling class folks show us who they are and what they're really about.
Ezekiel in the chat really summed up the last two apologies that we've written, that we've read. Apologize for the words, but keep doing the deeds. Indeed.
Right, absolutely.
I'm not interested in apologies like that.
All right, so that's going to be it for us today. Appreciate everybody's time. Like the stream and subscribe to the channel on your way out if you would. Donate to the show if you have the funds, tvlr.fm/donate. We are a union radio program on multiple terrestrial radio stations across the South. It costs money to do that. We have to pay people to help support our production and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, it costs money, and we couldn't do it without our supporters. tvlr.fm/donate for a one-time or regular monthly recurring donation. Also, our first ever live show is tomorrow, Sunday, September 17th at Shenanigans Comedy Theater off Lehman Ferry Road at 6 p.m. $20 for general admission, $35 for VIP. That gets you in an hour early to talk to us and our guests. Going to be a lot of fun. Union-made beer, union member testimonies about beating the boss, talking to activists about their work in the community, games, stand-up sets. Going to be a good time, folks.
Yeah,
come on out.
Some of the coolest activists and organizers in North Alabama will be there, so you'll definitely want to join.
tvlr.fm/store to get your tickets before it's too late. I think that we're probably going to be able to sell out. So if you want to get your ticket, then go ahead and get it today before it's too late. With that, we're going to go ahead and roll out unless you had any other plugs, Adam.
The only other plugs I wanted to mention is, of course, Labor Notes has some online training, so definitely check that out. The AFL-CIO actually has a training later this month about basically how to organize a union, 101. Let me pull up the date for you. September 27th at 6 p.m. All right, so that's the virtual training, How to Organize Your Workplace with AFL-CIO. Definitely wanted to mention that. And I'll be heading out to the UAH Human Rights Film Festival after this. And last plug is that on Monday, October 16th, Zen Education Project, which I'm a big fan of, is hosting a People's History of the Black Working Class, and you can tune in to hear historian Blair L.M. Kelly, who was a recent guest on our show. Really enjoyed our conversation with her, and she's going to be doing a little history class for folks, so sign up for that. And I guess the last thing is I will be on America's Workforce Radio next Friday.
Hey!
So check that out.
We love Flash. All right, folks. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in.